Megumin is an explosive arch-wizard of the Crimson Demons in the parallel world, and was the first person to join Kazuma's party. She is one of the main characters of the KonoSuba series, as well as the protagonist of the Explosion spin-off series. Welcome to the Imagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you're subscribed, and with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Early life. Megumin was born as the daughter of the impoverished Hyoizabaru and Yuyui, and spent much of her infant years playing outside alone while her parents were trying to sell their wares, though the lack of proper toys prompted her into foraging around the Crimson Demon village for anything fun-looking that she could tinker with. Already possessing a high intelligence at the age of 5, even by the standards of the Crimson Demons, Megumin, against the adults' advice, ventured into the Tomb of the Dark God, where she played with a puzzle game which was actually the Dark God's seal, and ended up releasing both halves of the imprisoned deity. The rampaging aspect of violence in the form of a huge black beast immediately attacked Megumin, though the little girl was accordingly saved by Wolbach, who cast an explosion to defeat and seal her other half, the display of which deeply impressed Megumin. Because Wolbach, who wanted to reward Megumin, wasn't able to grant her wishes of conquering the world, getting big breasts, or becoming the Devil King, Megumin instead asked to be taught how to cast Explosion. Despite Wolbach listing the disadvantages of her learning that overpowered and impractical spell, Megumin insisted on learning Explosion, the incantations for which Wolbach agreed to teach her over the span of several days. Megumin, however, kept inserting cool-sounding phrases into the incantations, as well as making cool poses while chanting, and to Wolbach's surprise, they actually made the explosions more powerful. Some days later, Megumin expressed her doggedness in only learning Explosion, even after she became capable of learning other advanced magic spells. Finally, the day came when Wolbach had to leave, so Megumin asked to see her cast Explosion again, while promising to show Wolbach her own explosion once she learned it. At some other point during her childhood, during which she became the older sister of Komeko, Megumin engaged in a friendly rivalry with her neighbor Bukorori, and at once drove him to tears by shoving him into the pond. School Days arc. By the time Megumin turned 12, she had already become an expert at scraping the nearby countryside for anything edible, while Komeko looked on, with cicadas from the forest and small crayfishes from the river being common game, since the sisters didn't have anything to eat while their parents spent long days abroad. In the anime, on the way back from one such trip to the river, the sisters ran into Yunyun as she played by herself, so thinking that she was hungry, Megumin gifted her with one of their crayfishes. Afterwards, they returned to find their parents back at their home and much richer from making a successful sale, allowing them to afford a sukiyaki feast as well as a new school uniform for Megumin's upcoming enrollment at school, where she hoped to learn explosion magic. Subsequent to the commencement ceremony at Red Prison, Megumin held herself in an aloof manner among her new classmates before Yunyun approached, claiming to be her rival, aiming at defeating her. As Megumin began her school days, learning all sorts of magical knowledge, she consistently maintained the best grades in the class, though during pop quizzes regarding the traditions of the Crimson Demons, her action-oriented answers always lost to Aru's ones centering on coolness, and was rewarded with many vials of skill-up potions that quickly brought her closer to learning explosion magic. Daily contests with Yunyun also became an imperative part of Megumin's life, since her inability to afford breakfast and lunch meant that she could only get to eat by beating Yunyun and taking her lunchbox as a prize. Her body, which was undeveloped due to malnourishment from her impoverished life, however, always brought her embarrassment whenever the school nurse using magic measured her underwhelming physical statistics, alongside the well-developed girls in the class, prompting Megumin to repeatedly take it out on Yunyun's breasts. Megumin's habit of shirking from physical education by making all sorts of excuses to her teacher before sleeping the lesson out in the sickbay didn't help her body grow either. At school, after classes ended on a hot summer day, Megumin and her classmates were discussing topics like wishing upon a star and curses, when the teacher came to tell the class that they would be postponed for an hour tomorrow because villagers planned to make it snow overnight to lower the temperature. After this, Megumin quarreled with Yunyun and Funifura due to them commenting about snowdrifts impeding her short body. She later returned home to catch crayfish and eat frogs with Komeko. Then, on the next morning, the sisters played in the new snow around the house until Yunyun came to remind them of school. Upon arriving at the schoolyard, Megumin found herself targeted by snowballs from Funifura and Dodonko, followed by Aru and Yunyun, so she chased them off with an icicle, and subsequently enjoyed the shaved ice sold to them by Narimaki, which indeed made her late for classes. When summer vacation came early, Megumin brought Komeko to Demon's Hill for harvesting wild tomatoes, then pitted the vegetables they captured against the onions that Narimaki had been harvesting in the area, though the weeping magic cast upon them by the onions made their eyes sore. Leaving Yunyun behind, the sisters loitered around Narimaki's family pub for people who would treat them to a meal. until Aru came to tempt Komeko through food into selling Megumin out to become her spelling checker for her novel manuscripts. Trapped indoors for the next 2 days because of thick snow, 2 more days later the sisters went out to gather the fish blown ashore by the great spirit of the storm. As snow began accumulating again, the sisters went to Aru's home to review her completed manuscript, where Megumin had a quarrel with the aspiring writer after making frank criticisms. Spending the following weeks heading to Demon's Hill for harvesting wild vegetables whenever food ran out, and helping Aru review her revised manuscripts, one day Megumin, upon seeing snowmen masterfully crafted by Yunyun, couldn't resist kicking them, and had to spend the next day with her making snowmen repeatedly. Megumin finally remembered that she still needed to do her summer homework when, on the last day of summer vacation, Dodonka and Funifura showed up at her home asking to copy them. Discovering Aru and Narimaki also in the same situation, the 5 girls proceeded to the chief's home, where it turned out Yunyun had finished her homework at the start of vacation. Guiltily accepting Yunyun's offer of letting them copy her homework, Megumin quarreled with the passive Yunyun in a fashion that looked like a couple to the bystanders, when, upon completing the copying by nightfall, took everyone to fulfill Yunyun's wish of watching stars on Demon's Hill, though they ended up only looking at the fireworks under a cloudy sky, courtesy of the villagers battling against the great spirit of the summer. The girls soon witnessed somebody summoning a shooting star, so in accordance with the Donko's belief, Megumin made a wish for herself to rattle the world one day alongside wonderful adventurer companions. After school restarted, during one class regarding special magic of the detonation series, Megumin inquired about explosion magic, which got left out of the lecture, only to be told that it was a useless and impractical spell because it took too much time and effort to learn, but couldn't be effectively wielded on adventures and battles. She later participated in a physical education lesson, where Puchin, as he cast a spell at the rain clouds above, demonstrated how to coolly enact magic, followed by the students pairing up for devising cool introduction phrases and poses. Coming up with an excuse to head to the sickbay so the partnerless Yunyun could team up with Aru instead, Megumin slept out the ensuing downpour claimed by Puchin to be the dark god's doing. While in the anime, Megumin was merely told to sit at the sidelines before having to go help the class catch the headmaster's tulips before they ran off once it started raining. Spending her time doing self-study at the school library after Puchin and other adults dealt with the rain's aftermath, Megumin studied books regarding explosion magic before entertaining herself with the Unfettered Lord and speaking up for Yunyun when Funifura teased her. Later dismissed early to return home in groups because the faculty discovered the seal at the tomb of the dark god tampered with, she was treated to a meal by Yunyun at the village cafe, during which they discussed topics of romance. Megumin eventually returned to her home at dusk, where Komeko proudly showed her the little black cat with wings who would later become Chomusuke. Uneasy with Komeko's idea of cooking the black beast that she had captured while playing outside, Megumin took it to the school the following day, claiming the cat to be her familiar formed from half of her soul, something Puchin allowed Megumin to do after hearing her excuse. The other students starting to call the cat Megumin, however, soon drove her crazy, so after many naming suggestions, they temporarily settled with Kuro that Yunyun had proposed. Following a trip to the village blacksmith, whose preference of having young girls wield giant weapons was commented on by Megumin, she returned home to hear Komeko talk about playing with a toy she found outside every day, a scenario Megumin found similar to the period when Wolbach appeared. The following day, Megumin won lunch by challenging Yunyun to stab between the fingers of her splayed palm using her new short sword, which forced her conscientious classmate into conceding. Later, hearing Yunyun reveal that she still needed 3 more skill points to learn advanced magic and gratitude, Megumin, who was saving up her skill points for the more costly explosion magic, talked of needing 4 more points before she could graduate. Doing self-study again because Puchin was out leading the village neats with hunting the aggravated monsters around the village, she had a discussion with Yunyun after discovering the loner reading books on making friends with inhuman creatures, and was about to volunteer to be Yunyun's friend when Funifura and Dodonko beat her to it. Receiving a share of lunch from Yunyun anyways, Megumin joined the other girls discussing romance while eating, before heading back home alongside Yunyun and running into Bukorori on the way. Upon returning home, however, Megumin inadvertently mistook the purchase order that Wiz handed to Komeko as a prank before discovering a terrifying Kuro placed in the pot courtesy of her starving sister, which prompted Megumin into bringing the cat to school ever since. Unable to extort food from Yunyun on a weekend, Megumin led Komeko to swindle some from Bukorori, although her ploy was rejected by the jobless NEET, so she again used dirty tricks to beat Yunyun at their daily contest in school the next day. When Puchin later declared field training against monsters in the forest, Megumin tried to invite Yunyun onto her team, only to watch her taken away by Funifura and Dodonko, leaving her to pair up with Aru instead. Armed with oversized mock weapons, once she and the other students started earning experience points by dealing the fatal blow to weak monsters frozen in place by Puchin. Megumin soon caught sight of a tearful Yunyun being pressured by Funifura and Dodonko to stab a frozen lovely rabbit, and so she stepped in to force Dodonko into doing the deed instead. The girls all paused when Aru alerted them to the presence of a servant of the dark god nearby. Then, as they panically scattered in different directions, Megumin ran alongside Aru and Yunyun while the monster headed straight for her. When the flying demon cut off their escape, the helpless Megumin offered up Kuro as a sacrifice, which peculiarly stopped the demon in its tracks, before Yunyun stepped between them in an attempt to drive the monster off. Eventually rescued by Puchin, who let them off early, Megumin's effort to have Yunyun accompany her home was thwarted by Funifura and Dodonko, who continued sticking by her side the next day, prompting an irked Megumin to fight and deviously defeat Yunyun in combat exercises by using Kuro to stop attacks. Later followed by Yunyun as she went home, they found Bokorori lurking around as he tried asking them for some help, before discovering to her surprise that somebody had been gifting Komeko with lots of food. In the anime, the girls were instead attacked by a gargoyle, prompting a panicked Megumin to flee alongside Aru, Yunyun's team, as well as Naramaki. They were subsequently rescued by Bokorori after jumping over the pit he had gotten himself trapped in, though his ensuing stalker antics disgusted Megumin so much she joined the other girls into abandoning him. Megumin and the other girls later reached a hill overlooking the village before witnessing it being destroyed, along with the gargoyle swarming it by the overzealous school faculty and some other villagers, who then had to rebuild it overnight. Megumin and Yunyun played a board game similar to chess the following morning while waiting to meet Bokorori. Yet, after Megumin flipped the board, thanks to the convoluted rules when she was about to lose, they discovered the NEET still asleep at his home, so Megumin got him violently woken up by citing his words to his father in a misleading fashion. The girls were later taken to the village's cafe where Bokorori asked for advice on how to hit on Soketo. The three of them next observed Soketo sweeping at her shopfront, making Megumin come up with the idea of asking Soketo to divine if she is Bokorori's fated lover, though Bokorori's lack of money to pay for the divination saw them going on a one-punch bear hunt in hopes of harvesting its valuable liver. The girls, though, got a fright when Bokorori cast Light of Reflection to render himself invisible while the one-punch bear caught sight of and went after them, before he cut it open from behind with the Light of Saber, yet the unexpected appearance of a whole sloth forced them to leave the liver behind as they fled. In the anime, Bokorori surprised Megumin when he teleported into the school library she and her class were self-studying at. Then, subsequent to her and Yunyun digging him out of the pile of books their classmates had buried him under, agreed to help him hit on Soketo. Returning to Soketo's shop only to find her having gone out, the girls were sickened by Bokorori giving a precise account of Soketo's habits discovered through stalking, but still agreed to strike up a conversation with a shopping Soketo to ask for her interests. Distracted by Yunyun as Soketo purchased a wooden sword, Megumin and the others tailed the fortune teller as she trained with her new weapon on falling leaves, and thus suggested Bokorori to help her by blowing more leaves down, only to have the NEET overdo it with Tornado and blow Soketo into the air as well. After escaping the baffled Soketo's pursuit, the girls were treated to lunch by Bokorori, so Megumin proposed for a masked Yunyun to attack Soketo in order for Bokorori to heroically come to the rescue, only to have Yunyun reject the idea. Next, hearing from the cafe's owner about Soketo heading for the dangerous forest to train, the girls joined an excited Bokorori in following the trail of monster corpses to locate her, only to look in horror when Bokorori's Inferno spell aimed at the attacking one-punch bears also caught Soketo in the blaze, before directing the enraged Soketo into beating Bokorori up. Later, expressing pity at the NEET when Soketo couldn't see anyone becoming Bokorori's lover, Megumin on the way back discussed with Yunyun the topic of their future lovers, though upon returning home she set out again to beat Bokorori up when Komeko talked of him sending her food, so in return the little girl will marry him when she grew up. At some point during the period, Megumin followed the tiring ritual for obtaining great magical powers as noted in the book A Certain Necro's Note that she found in her home storeroom, only to be enraged when Komeko told her how it was just a collection of nonsense penned by Bokorori. She also confronted the NEET for seducing her sister with food before they both boasted themselves as being the stronger upon Komeko asking. On one school holiday, she and Aru trailed Yunyun to observe what she did on breaks, which turned out to be heartbreakingly lonely scenes, prompting them to eventually show themselves and inviting Yunyun to play with games along with Funifura and Dodonko. Megumin, several days afterwards, became amazed when Yunyun not only handed her lunch to keep her from disturbing, but her test results didn't make it into the top 3 and disqualified her from receiving skill-up potions. Later, hearing Dodonko talk of witnessing Mitsurugi's party, Megumin began daydreaming of joining the party of an upright hero to defeat the Devil King before taking his place. Yunyun next came asking for advice on whether she should oblige with Funifera and Dodonko's request to help pay for the medicine needed by Funifera's ailing brother, so Megumin gave her some precautions about the matter before hearing Bukorori come talking about the new band of vigilantes he had set up, as well as the tourist attractions where dangerous things were sealed. Witnessing Yunyun giving in and handing money to Funifera and Dodonko on the way to school the following day, Megumin confronted the pair about the matter while shaking her bag, before offering to produce the medicine without the need to buy it. With the first lesson being the creation of magic items, she used the opportunity to ask Puchin for ways to make medicine capable of healing any sickness. Megumin accordingly followed the formula he provided and cut up some resisting mandrakes. Yet when reaching out for the Duxian, Yunyun adamantly stopped her from laying hands on the cute monster. Aru managed to defuse the situation by cutting up the Duxian's onion, which was needed for the medicine. Though upon hearing the relieved Yunyun talk of the Duxian's high experience points as well as culinary value, Megumin abruptly killed it to level herself up. Now known as the Duxian Slayer, Megumin called Funifera and Dodonko out after school to hand them the medicine, then demanded Yunyun's money back and warned them not to take advantage of her loneliness again, although she still beat the pair up when they teased her over her loving relationship with Yunyun. Joining Yunyun, who was waiting for her at the school gate along with Kuro, Megumin returned the money while vaguely explaining what happened, before taking advantage of the grateful Yunyun's offer to treat her to a meal by eating all that money away. All this happened at Torosuke's cafe in the anime. Taking a rest at a lakeside park before heading home, she boasted of how killing the Duxian at class only brought her to one more skill point left for graduation, then expressed disbelief when Yunyun revealed that she had purposefully refrained from raising her skill point so they could graduate together. Megumin proceeded to tell Yunyun how she avoided learning advanced magic despite having all the needed skill points already so she could achieve her goal of learning explosion magic before getting beaten up by a shocked Yunyun. Muttering excuses to explain her loss, Megumin went on to explain her reasons for learning explosion magic as well as her plans after doing so. She noticed a wild Duxian coming along and so killed it for dinner, and then managed to overpower the distraught Yunyun when she attacked her. As the girls headed to Megumin's home while dusk fell, they were alerted to the servants of the Dark God overrunning the village, so Megumin invited Yunyun to her home for sheltering while the villagers fought the demons, only to discover one of the monsters rummaging inside and no trace of Komeko. Using Yunyun to surprise the demon, Megumin managed to stab it to death with Yunyun's short sword before coming to the conclusion that Komeko had gone out. As Megumin resisted Yunyun's efforts to stop her from searching outside, they found another demon taking off with Kuro, whom Megumin prepared to abandon after her sword throwing missed the monster. Deciding to search for Komeko first, Megumin realized that her sister had been playing with the seal at the Tomb of the Dark God just like she herself had done many years ago. She immediately took Yunyun with her toward the tomb, where from the cover of bushes they indeed spied Komeko squaring off against the demons who had captured Kuro. Unable to count on the villagers, who were busy fighting demons elsewhere, Megumin had no choice but to abandon explosion magic for learning advanced magic so she could defeat the monsters surrounding Komeko, only to have Yunyun beat her to it through learning intermediate magic. Megumin soon took Komeko in escape as Yunyun fought the demons, though ridden with guilt over making her classmate get stigmatized as well as lose access to the school's skill-up potions because of her having learned intermediate magic. After a discussion with Komeko, she decided to turn back and fight. Laying in wait among the bushes for the coolest opportunity to show herself, Megumin got her moment stolen when Komeko jumped out upon the demon's reinforcements arriving, with Yunyun collapsing from fatigue after blasting the latest bunch of demons, only to have the whole horde herded to their position by the villagers who planned to take them all out in one powerful barrage. Megumin, as she unsuccessfully tried to evacuate everyone without the monsters noticing, finally grasped that Kuro was the Dark God, whom Komeko had freed when playing with at the Seal of the Tomb, and was now attracting the demons. Making up her mind to learn magic and notify their presence to the villagers, Megumin discovered to her elation that according to her adventurer card, she had accumulated enough skill points to learn explosion magic after killing the wild Duxian. Jubilantly learning her dream magic, she cast her first explosion at the demons all bunched together in the sky, wiping out the whole horde in a spectacular display and becoming addicted to the spell's sheer power. Megumin accordingly collapsed from spending all of her magical powers, which spurred her on to look for companions upon becoming an adventurer, and subsequently the limp girls were rescued by the villagers. Keeping what happened a secret to all villagers except for Puchin, Megumin was told by Yunyun of the goddess without a name released by her explosion, while also covering up the truth of the Dark God's unsealing by Komeko. As the two of them graduated from school after learning their magic, she decided to make Kuro her familiar, who she renamed to Chomusuke. Sometime afterwards, Soketo offered to divine Megumin's fortune for free, though after hearing that she would head for Axel and meet many adventuring companions, including a peculiar young man, the fortune teller only gave her vague answers on a calamity befalling the village, as well as the grand fate she was destined for. Journey to Axel arc. spending rare moments on some nights telling Komeko bedtime stories about the fairy tale of a lone adventurer who defeated the Devil King solo. Megumin, who needed to earn the 300,000 Eris teleportation fare to Arkenledia, tried for 6 months following her graduation to seek work around the village at magic item workshops, since she couldn't fight monsters without vulnerably collapsing after each explosion, yet failed in all of her attempts. Releasing her stress through explosions at the village outskirts during the nighttime and having Komeko drag her limp form home before the villagers catch her red-handed, she became anxious when labeled a NEET by her sister, and invited by Bokurori to join his Red-Eye Dead Slayers as another NEET member. Megumin thus tried to get a job dyeing cloth through magic at Chikara's shop, but was fired because she poured too much magic into the cloth and brought it to the verge of exploding, which ended up occurring in the anime. Next, seeking work at the potions shop, despite the pay being less promising, and with the ingredient gathering task that involved fighting one-punch bears proving too much for her, Megumin had to really consider one of the owner's alternative offers, where she was to test drink new potions. Following another nighttime explosion and Komeko dragging her on a bumpy sleigh ride back home, Megumin's daily transgressions finally caught up with her when Yunyun banged on her home's door early in the morning and demanded answers. Unable to deflect the deed onto the Devil King's army, she eventually confessed to be the culprit, as well as her woes of being unemployed. But when describing what she would need to do if she accepted the job for test drinking potions, Megumin became puzzled by Yunyun turning aghast before trying to burn down the potions shop in fury. She afterwards clarified what the job actually entails to Yunyun, who had misunderstood Megumin's earlier descriptions of the offer to mean prostitution. Later that day, Megumin brought Chomusuke along as she accompanied Yunyun into the village to find other lower-paying mundane jobs, but when working at a restaurant, she lost her temper upon Funifura and Dodonko sitting down as customers before throwing taunts, which got both her and Yunyun fired. They next worked as harvesters for crops raised by farmers through magic, yet Megumin kept getting a beating from the long onions, or potatoes in the anime, for meager pay. Full of stress by the end of the day, Megumin tricked Yunyun into accompanying her on a trip to relieve it by an explosion deep within the forest, which ended up waking some napping fire drakes. After being carried to safety by Yunyun, the pair was discovered by the patrolling Bokurori, at whom Megumin told a blatant lie about them fighting against a voluptuous female demon who was the explosion culprit. She was later dropped off back at her home by Yunyun, who promised to return in the morning for more work. But just as Megumin told Komeko to prepare the bath as she patted Chomusuke at the front door, a red-haired woman walked in looking for her master. Initially mistaking the master to be herself, Megumin was soon corrected by Arnis as she identified Chomusuke to be her master, Wolbach, whom she had been seeking. Although expressing unwillingness to part with her pet, upon Arnis leaving behind 300,000 Eris, Megumin quickly agreed to sell off the reluctant Chomusuke, with whom Arnis gave her one night to convey goodbyes. Accordingly, explaining her intent to Komeko during dinner while convincing herself of making the right choice, Megumin on the following morning presented Chomusuke to the first visitor of the day, who turned out to be Yunyun instead of Arnis. Managing to assure Yunyun how she didn't have to find work now that she had earned the teleportation fee through legitimate means, her misgivings over selling Chomusuke resurfaced when Arnis, who came to collect the cat, was unmasked to be a demon. Pressured into handing over her familiar, Megumin was saved when Yunyun cast a fireball at Arnis and attracted the attention of Bokurori and his vigilantes, who, thinking Arnis as the explosion culprit, chased her off with a magical barrage. In the anime, Megumin and Yunyun, out of pity, served Arnis tea after she was unmasked as a demon and fainted from recalling the trauma of all the betrayals by the scummy men attracted by a magic bracelet on her arm, right before Bokurori and other scummy village men attracted by the bracelet discovered and chased the demon off. Megumin, anyhow, decided to keep Arnis's money for the teleportation fee, and declared setting out on her journey the following day, at which she got invited by Yunyun to her home for a farewell party that Aru, Funifura, and Dodonko were also attending. She proceeded to receive a magic rod from Funifura and Dodonko, where they were grateful over the medicine she had brewed for Funifura's brother. Next, gifted by Yunyun a set of red wizard robes to replace the worn school uniform she'd been wearing since graduation, Megumin was subsequently given an eye patch by Aru that she fictitiously claimed to be a stealing item for her, which Megumin took a brand new specimen of. Accompanied by Yunyun on her way home following the party, she spoke about her goal of eventually defeating the Devil King and replacing him, as well as letting the neighbors take care of Komeko and taking Chomusuke on her journey, though in the anime she decided to go alone. After giving all sorts of advice to Komeko during their last night together, Megumin on her way out the following morning threw Bokurori under the bus by telling his father of how he taught her sister bad words, before she headed to the teleportation station, where she was seen off by her classmates who attended the farewell party sans Yunyun, and subsequently used up all of her wealth for getting teleported to Arkenledia. The confidence of Megumin quickly died down soon after arriving at Arcanledia, when she discovered that the local adventurer guild didn't allow her to take quests because she was too low leveled, leaving her unable to earn money for the carriage fare towards Axel. Sitting around a week later looking at the followers of the Axis Order trying unsuccessfully to convert passers-by to their faith, Megumin found herself mistaking someone else as Yunyun, thus got her act together for finding a job. Her losing control at being called a little girl by customers, however, got her fired from all the restaurants. Left to starve on the streets, Megumin, upon hearing a woman scream, rushed to an alleyway, where she found Cecily being grabbed by 2 priests of the Eris Order, prompting the Crimson Demon to step out and make an introduction. Grilling the priests, who denied Cecily's accusations about them assaulting her, the truth that Cecily, who had fled during the distraction, was being sought for stealing bread and defacing holy portraits at the Church of Eris surfaced, much to Megumin's embarrassment. Subsequently bewildered when Cecily returned with a policewoman while accusing the Eris priests of harassing a little girl, the confused Megumin was grabbed by the Axis priest into fleeing the scene at the first chance. Despite refusing Cecily's attempts to coerce her into signing a form for joining the Axis Order, an empty stomach made Megumin powerless to resist the offer of food at the Order's main cathedral. Brought to the dining hall of the main cathedral, where many followers were excited by her presence, Megumin thwarted an attempt to label her a member of the Order as soon as she eats their food. She was next introduced to Zesta, who offered her a room until she managed to find work, though Megumin was put off when, in response to her offer of doing accordingly as gratitude, Zesta pondered having her perform various perverted deeds. Accordingly, witnessing Zesta and other followers at a loss on how to improve their low conversion rates, Megumin proposed teaching them a few tricks. That night, however, she was harassed by Cecily when they were bathing and going to bed. Megumin, on the following day, brought Zesta into the city and planned to purposefully drop a bag of apples in front of helpful passers-by, so that Zesta can timely emerge when they're helping her pick up the apples to strike up a conversation for conversion. Yet this plan failed on a pretty female passerby because Zesta lecherously rushed off to drop the apples before sexually harassing the woman and scaring her off. Megumin next suggested for her to feign being assaulted by Zesta, which is actually a ploy to attract passers-by into coming to her rescue for conversion. But Zesta remained hidden when Megumin tried to pull this trick on a tough man who turned out to be a policeman, resulting in her getting lectured. Angry and wanting to head back, Megumin was persuaded into going on by the pontiff through food. So during the snack break, she talked to Zesta about Chomusuke. Proceeding to reveal her goal of seeking a busty woman who could cast explosion magic, she became surprised when Zesta recalled one such person running a magic item shop in Axel. Continuing after they finished eating, Megumin was shocked when Zesta replaced the toilet paper in public toilets with Axis conversion forms, without considering the possibility that people will use them for wiping instead of signing. After the pair got chased down by police, Megumin lost her patience and demonstrated a trick where she feigned tripping over in front of a kind-looking girl Zesta had spotted, only to discover her to be the unamused Yunyun, who in the anime brought Chomusuke along with her and lividly rolled Megumin down the road. Later, having Yunyun interrogating them and introducing them to Zesta, Megumin prodded her for the reason she came to Arcanledia, which forced Yunyun into making up more excuses. They all accordingly followed the pontiff back to the main cathedral, where Megumin initially defended Zesta from the female knight waiting to arrest him, until she changed her mind when Cecily and other followers listed some of Zesta's perverted antics. Following Zesta's arrest for conspiring treason based on Soketo's prophecy about the Devil King's army bringing catastrophe once anomalies occurred in the city's hot springs, Megumin noticed Yunyun's guilty reaction and forced her to confess on being the one who delivered the prophecy, before hearing from the Axis followers how they could manage without Zesta. Telling Yunyun the next morning not to fret over having delivered Soketo's letter, down at the cathedral's dining hall, Megumin was surprised to find only Cecily eating breakfast, since the other followers had gone out vying for votes to become the next pontiff, something the priest hired the Crimson Demons to help her with later on. After the initially unwilling Yunyun agreed to assist, Megumin suggested they investigate the inns that complained about anomalies within their hot springs, but became disgusted by Cecily betting on Zesta being guilty, in addition to witnessing another follower bribing for votes using Cecily's panties, the owner of which got upset because the votes weren't for her. Megumin continued to help obstruct additional crazy campaign activities by Tristan and other followers that were causing widespread disturbances, before taking a break with Yunyun, during which Cecily treated them to gelatinous slime. Finally going to investigate the inns, the trio were astonished to learn that the hot springs water from the traps had turned into gelatinous slime, something Megumin and Yunyun had to stop Cecily from drinking. Next, heading to the distribution systems, which channeled the hot springs water from its source in the mountains all over the city, they discovered the same thing happening with the water there too. As some policemen presented them with a sack of gelatinous slime powder that was poured into the system by Zesta the previous night, Megumin expressed skepticism over him doing it for sabotage, only to have the policemen dismiss her queries by citing the Axis Order's idiocy. While the three girls made their their way back in the afternoon, during which Megumin tried to cheer up the downhearted Cecily about the Pontiff's eventual return, only to be reminded by Yunyan of his possible execution, they became surprised to see Akaki Zesta being released from the police station because he was proven during interrogation to be innocent of conspiring treason. So Megumin was accordingly handed an unwanted bribe of gelatinous slime powder by Cecily for keeping her earlier attitude a secret. Walking back at dusk as they wondered who was behind the hot springs anomalies, Megumin was stunned to see Arnis threateningly approach the group demanding Chomusuke, and gave Zesta, who became excited at Arnis's scandalous attire, a brief overview of the demon. She was next dumbfounded by the normally shoddy Zesta easily reflecting Arnis's fireball before casting exorcism magic powerful enough to purify her, and could only watch while he, alongside Cecily, led other Axis followers into fanatically hunting after the fleeing Arnis. As they waited for things to die down, Megumin made fun of Yunyan by repeatedly changing her mind on when to head for Axel, so that Yunyan, who wanted to join her, had to keep changing her plans too. Megumin was subsequently gifted the money for the carriage to Axel by the returning Zesta as gratitude for her ideas for conversion that he planned to improve on, before they both ganged up on Yunyan by repeatedly alternating Megumin's departure plans. She, alongside Cecily, later bathed in the tiny hot springs blasted out behind the main cathedral, and accordingly cast an explosion in order to release her pent-up energy, which created a huge hot springs bath that Zesta later made into the Order's secret spring. Then, on the following morning, Megumin took Yunyan and Chomusuke to the carriage terminal, where Zesta, who welcomed her to visit the city again, gave her a blessing, and Cecily handed over a packet of Axis conversion forms that Megumin immediately threw in her face, before the caravan they boarded set out. While Megumin hogged the window side seat and bragged to a little girl traveling with her mother in the same carriage, she noticed a shadow trailing the caravan for a while before it disappeared. Later, as the caravan stopped for a break on a grassland along the highway between Arkanletia and Axel, Megumin, against Yunyan's advice, uttered some flag lines, before two crimson demons were asked by adventurers guarding the caravan to help against an attack by a crew of giant earthworms, prompting Megumin to begin chanting for explosion in panic until Yunyan began taking the disgusting monsters out by herself. Subsequently asked to compare herself to Yunyan by the little girl as the caravan continued on its way, she could only awkwardly boast of being stronger than her kin, who was now the center of attention. That night when the caravan made camp, Megumin became frustrated at Yunyan being treated not only like a star, but also mistaken to be her older sister. But just as the crimson demons were left alone by the campfire, Chomusuke was suddenly abducted by giant bats, which Megumin again left for Yunyan to defeat so that the cat could be rescued, though other adventurers, unimpressed by her inaction, began questioning her competence. During the caravan trip on the next day, once again Megumin tried to tout her abilities to the little girl while Yunyan and other adventurers battled attacking goblins, only to find Arnis herself assaulting the caravan. Displaying unwillingness to hand over Chomusuke, but also unable to return Arnis's money, Megumin tried citing the edicts of the Axis Order to worm her way out of the contract, which earned her a lecture from the demon over humans always breaking their promises. With Arnis, who mistook her for unable to cast any magic due to her inaction throughout the attacks by monsters that the demon had driven their way, easily beating up the other adventurers and using the whole caravan as a hostage, Megumin tried using Chomusuke as a hostage in return, only to see her ploy seen through as mere bluster. When she was once again called a fake crimson demon while Yunyan tried to defend her, Megumin, who had threw Chomusuke into the air and made to hit Arnis with an explosion only to be obstructed by Yunyan because of Chomusuke also being within the attack radius, rendering her unable to do anything as Arnis prepared to finish him off with a powerful cursed lightning. In the anime, Megumin noticed Arnis wearing one of Hyoizaburu's bracelets and thanked her for the business. Yet Arnis, who had suffered all sorts of misfortunes because of the flawed magic item, was instead further enraged, just as she readied an even larger cursed lightning for obliterating Megumin in body and soul. Just as Arnis was about to launch her magic while Yunyan prayed for divine intervention, something godly from the direction of Axel distracted the demon, allowing Chomusuke to break free from Arnis before being caught by Yunyan. Megumin immediately launched her explosion a split second quicker than Arnis's reaction to obliterate her. While in the anime, Megumin's explosion first overpowered Arnis's cursed lightning and then vanquished the demon. Now treated as the star of the caravan for the remainder of the trip, Megumin heard Yunyan declare the goal of defeating her once she learned advanced magic. When the caravan eventually rolled into the streets of Axel, soon after the Crimson Demons wondered what had distracted Arnis. The sight of Kazuma and Aqua following their arrival to her world caught Megumin's attention, though it made her want to avoid the pair. Eventually taking a rest at her inn room that the grateful caravan leader rented out for the Crimson Demons, the exhausted Megumin reread the fairy tale about the lone adventurer who defeated the Devil King only to replace him as the new Devil King, which reinvigorated her resolve to seek adventuring companions. Irregular of Axel arc. Megumin, before taking a rest, heard Kazuma and Aqua arguing downstairs about them regretting their choice of coming to this world, as well as glimpsed Dust preparing to throw a feast with his party. She was then awoken when Kazuma and Aqua had another argument over them having to sleep in the stables, thus went to eat with Yunyun as they discussed plans for becoming adventurers, during which Megumin heard some other adventurers refer to Wiz as the busty arch wizard who can cast explosion magic, though she held back from visiting her and instead chose to become a seasoned adventurer first. Early the following morning, Megumin took Yunyun to the local guild in hopes of impressing other adventurers with a pompous introduction, only to turn embarrassed upon discovering the building to be empty of patrons. She thus decided to let Yunyun register first, and waited until more adventurers arrived before she asked Luna to verify her adventurer card for registration. As anticipated, Luna blurted out for a crowd to hear about the Crimson Demon's high intelligence and magical power stats, though Megumin was put off from hearing the receptionist comment about her magical power being lower than Aqua, whom the ruffian and some other adventurers advised her to avoid since she's an Axis follower claiming to be a goddess. With her initial introduction attracting a proliferation of parties trying to recruit her, Megumin, hoping to get bigger shares of quest rewards, sought out those with few members, while leaving Yunyun to her own devices in hopes that she could overcome her communication handicap. When performing a test quest alongside Rise and Lina against chestnut rats preying on a chestnut orchid, however, the overpowered explosion Megumin unleashed not only obliterated the monsters but also the chestnut trees they were supposed to protect, resulting in the party of siblings ditching her once hearing of the Crimson Demon being capable of nothing but casting one explosion per day, as well as Megumin having to spend all her money to pay for the chestnut trees she had blown away. Back at the guild, Megumin noticed the lonesome Yunyun's party recruitment advertisement, which was written like one asking for friends, before hearing Kazuma and Aqua getting fired from their job at the guild's dining hall. Cheering up upon realizing herself in a better situation and deciding to call it a day, she heard the horrifying story from Yunyun about how only a weirdo man responded to her recruitment advertisement, prompting Megumin to advise her into writing a better one. Hearing a guild announcement the following day about a powerful demon being sighted in the nearby forest, Megumin noticed Yunyun, who was playing board games by herself, removing some requirements from her advertising. Next, looking at the other recruitment advertisements, she skipped the conceited one from Mitsurugi as well as the one where Chris overrode Darkness's requirements, before settling on the advertisement from Ain's party. Yet when accompanying their party into the forest, where in the anime they glimpsed Chris chasing after a slime-covered Darkness, Megumin was unable to help against a swarm of slimes in fear of her explosion hitting them too, and only embarrassed herself when trying to smack down using her magic rod a flock of bloody squirrels that pissed on her. Just as Lot began questioning her competence, their party was shocked to see a mega slime approaching to eat the dead bloody squirrels and prepared to retreat, at which Megumin proudly impressed them by vanquishing the mega slime with one explosion. She was subsequently taken back to the guild where Ain's party congratulated her, but as soon as she confessed about only being able to use explosion and having no intention of learning other spells, they too decided against letting her join them. Seeking the company of Yunyun for solace, Megumin, over a board game match, recounted her failure to secure a party while hearing of another weirdo responding to Yunyun's advertisement, before she flipped the board upon her imminent loss. Once again contemplating her worthlessness during her way back to the inn, the sight of Kazuma and Aqua getting fired from their job at the banana stall managed to encourage Megumin into going on. A week passed without any party willing to let Megumin join them, so she began casting explosions outside the city gate before collapsing, much to the vexation of the city guard who had to carry her back into the city, something that was performed by the construction foreman in the anime while he had told her about Wiz being a busty archwizard who could cast explosion magic. Slumping over back at the guild, where only Yunyun's advertisement for recruitment remained, Megumin had Chomosuke topple a house of cards meticulously stacked up by a lonesome Yunyun, who proceeded to tell her about the demon in the forest driving monsters closer to the city. They were interrupted when a drunken Dust picked a fight with Mitsurugi, something Megumin advised Yunyun to ignore lest they get too embroiled, and was accordingly stopped by Yunyun when she wanted to go watch Dust getting beaten up by Mitsurugi. Spending the next several days casting explosions at giant toads in the vicinity of the city gate, Megumin got lectured by the city guard over her creating craters that Kazuma and a complaining Aqua had to fill. She returned to the guild where adventurers scrambled to tear down the recruitment advertisements upon seeing her, and the interrogation of one adventurer revealed that rumors about her being a crazy crimson demon who recklessly casts explosions had circulated around the city to frighten parties from letting her join. The piqued Megumin promptly chanted for an explosion, and only through obstructions by other adventurers, as well as Luna's warning about her getting arrested for casting powerful magic within city limits, were a catastrophe averted. Megumin next found Yunyun being pressured into a date by the lies of a weirdo, and after scaring him off, learned to her horror about other weirdos having approached the vulnerable loner, who had already accepted an Axis conversion form that Megumin quickly threw away on sight. She suggested that they team up for the time being, yet Yunyun unexpectedly got mad before tussling with her, resulting in both of them being kicked out of the guild by Luna. On their way back to the inn, they were approached by Hagen, who asked for help to locate the runaway heiress of the dustiness noble household, whom Megumin visualized as a dainty damsel, though the only woman they could find with noble features was Darkness, who didn't fit her mental picture. Leaving Chomusuke in her inn room on the following day, Megumin accompanied Yunyun as she hunted giant toads on the grasslands outside the city, before proceeding with her real goal of going after the demon in the forest by persuading Yunyun to venture inside through allures of being recruited into parties. They eventually encountered some cute, lovely rabbits, which Megumin remembered to be dangerous monsters, as proven when they were discovered to have killed and devoured a wolf before leaping at the Crimson Demons, in hopes of impaling them. Managing to escape the onslaught, Megumin, as they made their way back, noticed the lovely rabbits being driven toward them in numbers that Yunyun couldn't handle, so she cast an explosion upon the colony at close range, which took out all the monsters but also blew them unconscious. Megumin woke up to find Host asking if they had seen a big black beast, at which she disregarded the Crimson Demon style introduction he made, and instead fled in terror alongside Yunyun. Returning to the guild at dusk, all traumatized, they collected the rewards for the giant toads, as well as reported about the demon, then headed to the inn subsequent to Luna declaring the forest off limits. Noticing on the way back Kazuma and an energetic Aqua finishing their work for the day, Megumin, as she remembered Host finding her similar to somebody, discovered Chomusuke starved unto unconsciousness inside of her room. At some point during the period, she and Yunyun were exploring around the city when they heard some passers-by whisper glorious praise about their tribe, and delightedly bought some magic items from a nearby stall owner who heaped more flattery upon them, only to turn aggressively violent after overhearing the stall owner and the passers-by gloat over how they had conspired to con the Crimson Demons into buying fake junk at high prices. Megumin also wrote a letter to Komeko, summarizing her journey to Axel in addition to giving her sister a lot of advice. When the guild assembled a hunting squadron against Host after a week had passed, Megumin joined in because rewards can be obtained simply by participating, and successfully talked the uneasy Yunyun into tagging along. Next, managing to keep her rage in check when Rex mocked the Crimson Demons as little girls, she was grabbed from behind by Yunyun anyways, and accordingly took it out on the big breasts pressing on her back. Megumin later joined Yunyun and Rex's party in the Stern Guard when the squadron ventured through the forest, and subsequently to exchanging barbs with Rex, ordered Yunyun to eliminate a swarm of slimes fleeing from Host towards them, though this only made Rex respect Yunyun and not her. She and the other adventurers accordingly withdrew in a panicked retreat when the vanguard came running back bawling about Host defeating them and Mitsurugi with powers akin to the Devil King's generals. Then, following Luna's report about no reinforcements arriving and the existence of a blue-haired archpriest in the city during the after-action assembly at the guild, Megumin decided to head back to the inn. Passing by scores of excited male adventurers running around in search of the blue-haired archpriest said to possess the beauty of a goddess, she witnessed Aqua swindling an adventurer who made her drop her wages of more money, and judged that she couldn't possibly be that archpriest. Returning to her room only to find it already occupied by Cecily, Megumin, after an unsuccessful attempt to leave, heard how she was sent to Axel for investigations because Zesta detected their goddess begging for money from the city, before turning disgusted at Cecily crawling into her bed to sniff her sheets, but immediately changed her tune once the priest offered to pay her with the order's money amounting to millions in exchange for finding that blue-haired archpriest and defeating Host. With a mental image of that archpriest being devout and saintly in mind, during their evening search, Megumin dismissed Cecily's suggestions of where the clergy of the Axis Order can be found, and instead took her to a church of the Eris Order, where they couldn't find the archpriest but ended up chased off because the antagonistic Cecily kicked at the door and broke a window. Stopping Cecily from entering a bar where performers frequent despite her insisting the archpriest to be inside, Megumin dragged her to search at an orphanage, and again crossed out Aqua, who frequently ate the free meals served there. Lastly, venturing into the pitch-dark public cemetery in hopes that the archpriest was placating lost souls there, she got mad at Cecily, who screamed to scare her before they were both scared off by the appearance of Wiz. Megumin, following a bad night's sleep, woke up to have Chomusuke cozying up on her, and accordingly left the cat behind to go rendezvous with Yunyun at the guild, then exchanged barbs with Rex, who came asking for Yunyun's help to capture a beginner's bane that was seen in the nearby mountains, for serving as a bargaining chip with Host. Tagging along while the others eliminated a tribe of goblins to draw out the beginner's bane lurking about before Yunyun put it to sleep, just as Megumin doubted if the big black beast sought by Host really was the monster they loaded into the cage, the said demon suddenly appeared and instantly defeated Rex's party. After an unsuccessful attempt to slip away with Yunyun while Host discovered it wasn't Wolbach in the cage, Megumin, whom Host smelled the scent of his master from, realized how he too was after Chomusuke. Offering to give Host another black cat only to be ignored, she was next demanded to hand over Chomusuke on the following day in exchange for the safety of the city's people. As soon as she and Yunyun brought the unconscious forms of Rex and his party back, Megumin, upon grasping that nobody will come to their rescue this time, became determined to settle the matter herself. Dropping off Rex's party at the Eris Church, she bickered with Yunyun over Host's deal and her loneliness, before informing the guild of the bleak news, which sent them into despair. Unable to depend upon the guild, Megumin cited their friendship to get the agitated Yunyun into helping her defeat Host. She next headed to their inn to ask Cecily for an advance on the rewards for Host's defeat, and was promptly handed a bag that turned out to be filled with stones, driving Megumin to throw them at Cecily until she was handed 100 million Eris, which was accordingly given back to Yunyun for purchasing magic items useful for their upcoming battle, in addition to a black stuffed toy cat. After asking around the guild for other adventurers to assist them only to be refused, Megumin warned those who regularly harassed Yunyun not to approach her again, and also heard about Darkness and Chris rushing out to fight Host. As Megumin rendezvoused with Yunyun later on, she became delighted to find a scroll of concealment, then tied Chomusuke onto the black stuffed toy cat to leave her scent on it, since the plan was to lure Host out with the stuffed toy, while Megumin laid in ambush close by using the scroll of concealment so she could destroy him with an explosion. Megumin afterwards handed Chomusuke to Cecily for safekeeping before going to bed, but soon found herself unable to sleep from the excitement while reminiscing upon all she had gone through the prior year. Suddenly detecting somebody unlocking her door just as she remembered missing out on her daily explosion, Megumin feigned sleep in preparation to retaliate, only to discover that the intruder was Yunyun, who began recounting how amazing she found her courage against Host was, in addition to what she thought of her other stupid antics and incredible feats. It was, however, followed by an explanation of Megumin's plan being doomed to fail because the preparation for explosion would reveal her location, subsequent to which Yunyun, having secured the assistance of Rex's party against Host, put Megumin to sleep. Jolting awake the following morning, Megumin hurriedly dressed and rushed out where she ran into Cecily, to whom she briefly explained the situation and received a blessing from her before heading to the battle location. There, she approached under the cloaking from the scroll of concealment the spot where Yunyun was holding out against Host thanks to support from Rex's party and the magic items, which prompted Megumin to stay hidden until the time was right for her to show up. Accordingly, blinded by the flash cast by Yunyun, by the time her eyesight returned, Megumin found Rex's party defeated, while Yunyun paralyzed both Host and herself at a stalemate, courtesy of Yunyun drinking a potion created by Hyoizabaru that had a weird side effect. Megumin consequently showed herself in a pompous display and mockingly reiterated the embarrassing things Yunyun had said to her the previous night. Proceeding to vent her frustration of not having released an explosion yesterday, Megumin, in a display that stunned Rex's party, obliterated the still immobilized Host with a powerful explosion. Collapsing from exhaustion, she, along with the others, were taken back to the city by guild employees. Knowing how it was her responsibility that Host came to Axel in the first place, on the following day, Megumin let Rex's party keep all the rewards from defeating Host, then, alongside Yunyun, bid farewell to Cecily, who went adventuring to level up. She was next led outside the city gate by Yunyun before hearing her declaration of traveling to learn advanced magic, so Megumin gifted Yunyun all of her money and promised to compete with her again when she returns. Beginner Adventurer Arc. Sitting around at the guild with an empty stomach some days later, Megumin, who still couldn't find party members, began regretting giving away all her money. Yet, despite being given an invitation to join in Rex's party, their intent to head for the royal capital prompted the low-leveled Megumin into declining. Next, regretting not asking for a meal from them as they left, Megumin noticed a new recruitment advertisement from the party of Kazuma and Aqua. So, without any other choice, she headed over and gave them a Crimson Demon-style introduction. As Aqua told the unamused Kazuma about the Crimson Demons, the starving Megumin began begging for food, before Kazuma grabbed and snapped her eye patch onto her eye for kidding him about its sealing function. Eventually treated to a meal by Kazuma, Megumin accompanied them on continuing their quest against giant toads out on the grasslands. She, however, was perplexed when hearing about Aqua claiming to be a goddess before casting an explosion to obliterate a distant giant toad, yet could do nothing to prevent her accordingly immobilized body from being gobbled up by another toad that newly emerged. When having her limp and slimy form piggybacked by Kazuma as he and Aqua took her back, Megumin explained to Kazuma how she was only capable of casting one explosion per day. She proceeded to vehemently grab onto Kazuma once he too tried to ditch her, and then, upon some passersby misunderstanding him to have sexually tormented the girls with slime, loudly talked about sexual play until Kazuma hurriedly agreed to let her join his party, following which she went with Aqua to wash off at the public baths. On the following day at the guild, Megumin taught Kazuma how to learn skills using his adventurer card, but became depressed when he refused to join her on the explosive path and called her a lolly girl. After Kazuma returned from learning thief skills taught by Chris, like other females within earshot, she became stunned when Darkness blurted out how he had stripped Chris of her panties before taking all of her money, before describing Kazuma as a class changing into a pervert when he demonstrated steel. She next itched for a fight against the Devil King when Kazuma described to Darkness, who wanted to join their party, his goal of defeating the strongest opponent in the world. And during the subsequent cabbage harvest, she cast an explosion into the middle of the swarm, which Darkness managed to withstand despite being at its epicenter. Some days later, at Darkness's suggestion, the party took a quest for hunting a zombie maker at the public cemetery, but instead encountered Wiz during her ritual of sending the ghosts of the buried dead who couldn't afford a proper burial to the afterlife, following which she reminded Kazuma, who struck a deal with the Lich, how powerful those kings of undead actually are. Following the replacement of a high-quality manatite onto her magic rod thanks to the rewards from the cabbage harvest, Megumin had Kazuma accompany her on daily explosion exercises well away from the city. She had decided to cast her explosions on an abandoned castle because of it being big and tough enough. Thus, once a day during the ensuing week, Megumin would send an explosion at the castle before being carried back by Kazuma. This, however, led to Beldia, the Devil King's general who resided in that castle, showing up at Axel's gates to rage about some idiot casting irritating explosions every single day, at which Megumin tried deflecting the blame onto another female mage. She eventually stepped forward to Ona, but refused the Dullahan's demands for her to stop the explosions. Yet, just as Megumin was about to let Aqua deal with the rest, the peaked Beldia cast a curse at her that heralds death after a week, though Darkness jumped between them to take the curse instead. Tormented by guilt following the Dullahan's departure, Megumin and Kazuma made up their mind to accept Beldia's invitation of raiding the castle and making him remove the curse, only to be dumbfounded when it was easily broken by Aqua. The experience, though, didn't make Megumin learn her lesson, and on the contrary, she asked Aqua to accompany her as she continued casting daily explosions at the castle. At some point during this period, Megumin took a job for demolishing a boulder at a nearby quarry, during which she mercilessly blew up a baby wyvern nesting on it in the hopes of earning the title Dragon Slayer, though in the end the kill didn't qualify. Megumin also blew up a roper she chanced upon on her way to daily explosions, and tried vying for leadership of the party only to back out once she realized the liabilities which party leaders are responsible for. During the party's hunt for a golden bamboo, she found herself attacked from below by bamboo shoots. In the audio drama, it was also during this period that Megumin asked Kazuma to pretend dating her in an attempt to make a stalker thought to be fancying her give up. Accompanying her party in distantly observing Aqua while she purified the Riverhead Lake near Axel from within a cage, during the wait before the brutal alligators began attacking, Megumin claimed that Crimson Demons don't need to use the toilet. As they later carted Aqua back to Axel in the cage, Megumin refused the offer from Kyoya Mitsurugi of joining his party, then despite not buying Aqua's claims of being a goddess, later informed Mitsurugi, who came asking Kazuma for Gram back about how he had already let go of the cursed sword. Megumin's secret continuation of explosions at the abandoned castle finally culminated with Beldia, whose reappearance at Axel invited a response from the city's adventurers, raging all about it in front of Kazuma, who then angrily pulled at Megumin's cheeks. She was then instructed by Kazuma to cast explosion at Beldia's army of undead knights once he and Aqua lured them outside the city gates, which blew up all the horde, with Beldia also caught inside the attack in the anime, though he did manage to survive. Dubbed the Crazy Explosion Girl by the other adventurers because of this, Megumin afterwards discovered a piece of coolly named Devil King's blood at some shop one day. She wanted to get her hands on it despite it already being ordered by some noble. Later, witnessing Chris swiping away the cursed gem, she used the excuse of going after the thief for shoplifting as an opportunity to covet the Devil King's blood, and successfully kept it despite Kazuma arriving to help Chris by making a scene about her being robbed, attracting policemen who chased the pair away. Deep Winter Arc. As the cold, hard winter approached, Megumin became excited when Kazuma agreed to take a quest for hunting snow sprites, and later at the Snowfield Forest took up many of them with an explosion. Upon the appearance of the Winter Shogun, keen on avenging the snow sprites, she used her post-explosion immobility to her advantage by playing dead. After the party returned to Axel following Kazuma's decapitation and resurrection, Megumin explained to him the fearsome might of the Winter Shogun, as well as the standards for which reward amounts are determined. In the one-day party swap between Kazuma and Dust, protagonist, Megumin first surprised their temporary member by agreeing that they go fight dragons, which made him speechless by demonstrating her explosion at an open field, which ended up attracting a beginner's bane. Originally picked up by Dust, who had prepared to flee, the immobile Megumin next found herself placed under the ground at an angle from which she couldn't see what he was doing. After the delinquent managed to drive off the beginner's bane, Megumin got carried by him back to the guild, where they waited for Kazuma's return so they could revert to their original parties. After Kazuma's decision to venture into Kiel's dungeon alone, Megumin, who expressed reluctance at heading inside dungeons because her explosions would cause a cave-in, simply escorted him to its entrance, where she and Darkness waited until his and Aqua's return. When Kazuma and Aqua took up a request to take care of a ghost problem at an empty mansion in place of Wiz, Megumin accompanied the party as they moved into the property. Waking up that night with a need to use the toilet, possessed dolls roamed around the mansion and drove her to take refuge in Aqua's empty bedroom, where she was soon joined by Kazuma. They next had to flee when the dolls crowded in from outside the window before the pair managed to make it to the toilet, only to be forced into barricading themselves once the dolls caught up and tried breaking in the door. Although the terrified Megumin began chanting for explosion, the ordeal was accordingly brought to an end when Aqua and Darkness took care of the ghosts possessing the dolls. At some point during this period, Megumin, at the guild's behest, tested out the sword of Shaq the Ripper on the chain, holding a captured Neroid and other objects with alarming adeptness. Yet just as she began considering leaving the explosive path, her attempt at a revenge match against giant toads using the magical sword that cannot harm living creatures resulted in her being gobbled up and requiring Kazuma to rescue. Megumin also taught Kazuma how to play a board game similar to chess, and taunted him after repeatedly flattening him at it. On a rainy day, when Kazuma was reluctant to bring her out for explosions, Megumin hoped to force him out through winning at board games. Instead, she suffered repeated defeats at shogi matches before losing her gambit on guessing the gender of the mansion's next visitor, which turned out to be Chris. In the audio drama, Megumin joined her party on a simple delivery quest into the mountains, where she failed to save Kazuma from falling to his death due to a landslide, and had to apologize to the homeowner whose roof was damaged when his body fell into it. Accepting a job for polishing a crystal ball, which she, upon finishing, smashed into pieces in order to relieve stress before asking Kazuma to pay for the repairs, Megumin followed Aqua after she was hired by Abram to solve a ghost problem at his mansion, only to discover its identity to be his recently deceased father, Pickles. In order to fulfill the wishes of Pickles so he could pass into the afterlife, Megumin hugged a stuffed toy possessed by the ghost, who then irritated her into contemplating explosions upon him, while she dressed up as a maid in the audio drama. Following her party to a patch of forest when Darkness accepted a scouting quest on the powerful messenger, Megumin, upon witnessing the nightmarishly disgusting visage of the earth spirit, panicked, before casting an explosion that wounded it. Later discovering Darkness being cursed into weakness by the monster, she took advantage of the situation to beat the Crusader at arm wrestling, though the Archwizard a few days later missed the strong meat shield which usually protected her from harm as reports of the powerful messenger approaching the city filled in, up until the curse was eventually lifted. Megumin also joined the party in accompanying Wiz on a request to eliminate ghouls and her subsequent contest against Wolfgang over who is king of the undead, where the Crimson Demon jumped at Aqua's suggestion of testing whether the Lich or the vampire could endure her explosion, though she nevertheless relented to Kazuma's proposal of subtler competing methods, before jumping in to save Wiz from being opportunistically purified by Aqua. When a quest against a white tiger was posted, Megumin excitedly pushed her party into going, though the nimble sacred beast managed to dodge the explosion she had panically cast in response to its appearance. Megumin later vied for keeping the tiger's cub, taking care of it and letting it play with Chomusuke, then accompanied the party in sending it back to its mother. On the night after she and Darkness spent their time on another board game match, Megumin enjoyed a crab pot but was forbade from drinking wine like Aqua. Later that night, she was alerted to the lolly succubus being caught up upon the magical barrier erected by Aqua around the mansion, before beating up Kazuma, who had covered for the low-ranking demon's escape. When the mobile fortress destroyer advanced into Axel, Megumin initially packed up to evacuate the city and storm the Devil King's castle, before Kazuma dragged her to the guild meeting, where the strategy to have her and Wiz cast explosions to immobilize the rampaging ancient weapon after Aqua breaks its magic barrier was formulated. Panicking anyways when faced with the charging destroyer, she, at Kazuma's spurring, managed to blow the legs off of one side of the fortress with explosion, though it still proved weaker than the one cast by Wiz. Her limp form left outside while Kazuma and other adventurers stormed the destroyer, Megumin was later recharged with Aqua's magical power through Kazuma's drain touch as the fortress was about to explode, before casting her second explosion of the day to destroy the destroyer. Late Winter Arc. With Senna coming to arrest Kazuma for treason because the destroyer's Coronatite core that Kazuma teleported away obliterated Elderb's mansion, Megumin initially defended Kazuma, only to back out after Senna threatened to arrest and imprison anyone vying for Kazuma for the same charges as him. Fearing Kazuma's reprisal once he gets out, however, she agreed to Aqua's plan of distracting the guards with an explosion outside of city walls late at night so the archpriest can help him escape from jail. Yet, despite immediately being evacuated from the scene by Darkness, Megumin was still identified to be the one responsible, with the same story repeating the following night, even though she and Darkness put on masks to hide their faces. Then, during the trial where Kazuma's party members acted as his defense attorneys, despite their practice mock trials gearing them up for nothing but how to shut objection, Megumin vehemently protested the flimsy basis of Sena's claims, only to have her own past actions used by the prosecutor for proving her case against Kazuma, before the Crimson Demon proceeded to show the court what a terrorist really does upon the judge peculiarly declaring Kazuma guilty. Then, after the trial was postponed thanks to Darkness, she had her valued possessions at the mansion confiscated by knights as debt collateral for damages to Elderp's mansion. Megumin formally introduced Chomusuke to Kazuma and Aqua the day afterwards, before panicking when contemplating about the absent Darkness enduring unspeakable ordeals. Her explosions were subsequently accused by Sena as the reason that giant toads hibernating underground just outside the city began surfacing prematurely, so she, along with Aqua, were forced by Kazuma to go take care of them. Taking out many of the amphibians with an explosion, only to be gobbled up by a newly emerging one, the limp Megumin managed to stop herself from being swallowed through standing on her magic rod, and refused Kazuma's offers to help because it was warmer inside the giant toad's mouth, until her body began getting gradually swallowed anyways. Saved by the returned Yunyun's Light of Saber, Megumin pretended not to know her until she made a Crimson Demon-style introduction, proceeding to scare Yunyun with misleading accounts of how she vanquished Beldia and the Destroyer while also refusing a magic contest due to her magical power all spent. Megumin suggested that they have a combat contest, which Yunyun soon admitted defeat on once Megumin came at her all stinky and slimy, though no mercy was given as Megumin grabbed onto Yunyun to spread the slime upon her. Winning from the Teary Yunyun a piece of high-quality manatite, which was then gifted to Kazuma for paying off his debts, Megumin also hugged onto Kazuma to get him all slimy once she realized that he was internally ranking Yunyun to be much better than her. Making it back to their mansion while Aqua was still out, she and Kazuma quarreled over who gets to bathe first, before she was surprised by Kazuma nonchalantly undressing in front of her, though provocations by his taunt spurred her into bathing with him. The two of them accordingly discussed Yunyun while in the bathtub, before Kazuma panicked at Aqua's return and expended all his magical power to freeze the bathroom door shut. Next, realizing how Kazuma was afraid of being called a lolicon if someone saw him bathing with her, the peaked Megumin began attacking Kazuma, who lay helplessly limp on the floor until Aqua stepped in to save him. When wandering around the city on the following day, Megumin noticed a stall where the owner offered a monetary prize for anyone who could break a lump of adamantite, so she confidently strode into challenge, only for the nearby Kazuma and other adventurers to prevent her from casting explosion until the stall owner fled. With Yunyun trailing behind the two of them as they strolled around, she accepted another contest that Yunyun proposed to be about adult development. Megumin then bragged over how much more adult she had become ever since bathing with Kazuma, and after driving the shocked Yunyun away in tears again, went on to triumphantly note another victory in her notebook. In the anime, Megumin accompanied Kazuma to Wiz's shop after Yunyun's return, where she discovered the loner constantly laying in wait in hopes of running into her by coincidence. Accepting Yunyun's proposal of using a friendship crystal to make them friendlier, she discovered to her horror that the magic item actually showed images of all their past embarrassing moments, prompting her to frantically break the crystal, which she then had Wiz charge Yunyun for before beating the loner in adultness. Following a few days of worrying about Darkness who had not come back, a period in the anime when Megumin escorted Kazuma and Aqua to Kiel's dungeon before she stayed outside the entrance practicing her explosion poses with Chomusuke, Megumin became speechless upon Aqua tearfully accusing Kazuma of stealing her clothes for debt repayment. Then, as Darkness returned to explain how she was the heiress of the Dustiness household and wanted them to help her ruin an arranged marriage, Megumin went out for a meeting with Yunyun in hopes of helping Kazuma prove his innocence, while in the anime she was instructed to accompany Sena for investigating some peculiar self-destructing monsters. Megumin later returned as Sena came to outright accuse Kazuma for the Vanir dolls emerging from Kiel's dungeon, and consequently accompanied Kazuma to the dungeon's entrance, where she stayed outside with Aqua in addition to Sena and her hired adventurers. She soon became dazzled by the cool-looking mask of Vanir stuck into the face of Darkness whom he possessed, before casting an explosion at her under the Crusader's own suggestion to vanquish the Duke of Hell. A week following Aqua fully healing darkness when the party found her still alive, a possible time interval for Kazuma to have put on a wish-granting choker from Wiz's shop that slowly chokes him to death unless his wish is granted, and force Megumin to compete in strip rock paper scissors against Yunyun as well as other debasing things he requested, only to kill him after being enraged by his confession. Megumin pacified Chomusuke, whom Kazuma and Aqua had a quarrel over, before the party was declared by Senna to be free of treason charges and debt, as well as a huge reward for their exploits. At some point during the period, Megumin was visited by the famous artist Gilbert, who commissioned her to let him witness an explosion for inspiring his creativity. So, subsequent to touring a number of locations around town that Kazuma deemed as untargetable, she ended up obliterating a mansion ordered to be demolished by its noble owner. When Kazuma reported experiencing serious stomach pains after Megumin returned from a girls' meeting, she spooked his fears of being infested by a parasitic monster as payback for eating all by himself some delicious vegetables he had won, and later restrained a panicked Kazuma as he tried to flee from the hospital. In the audio drama, it was also during this period when Megumin went to help Wiz with the quest against ghouls. One day, when Megumin was staying in the warm mansion with her party, a policeman came with a warrant for her arrest on suspicion that she was involved with repeated explosions around Axel, so she promptly threw the warrant into the fireplace. Next, infuriated when even her party members believed in her guilt, Megumin agreed on heading to the police station for interrogation, where, as she expected, the magic bell there, capable of detecting lies, proved her claims of innocence. Returning to the mansion alongside the apologetic Laliarina, she next became cross at the way her party members changed their tune, and got further riled up when Laliarina couldn't come up with other suspects. Finally deciding to solve the case herself upon hearing Aqua suggest the culprit to be a stronger wielder of explosion, Megumin took Kazuma and Laliarina to the guild for clues, but instead became enraged because Luna immediately pointed fingers at her once hearing about the case. At Kazuma wondering if the culprit's goal was to frame Megumin, she began accusing random adventurers and pointing out anybody having a grudge against her because of her own misdeeds as possible suspects, and this instead led to Kazuma suggesting her arrest. Megumin thus took them to the library for accusing the solitary Yunyun, and managed to convince Laliarina into taking Yunyun back for questioning. Yet, the ensuing proving of Yunyun's innocence prompted the deputy police chief into slapping an explosion ban on Megumin just in case. An emergency quest against a sloth of one-punch bears approaching the city gave Megumin the chance to blackmail Laliarina, since the other adventurers were depending on her explosion. With the ban lifted, she proceeded to take out all of the monsters in one blow, before indicating the resulting crater to be much larger than the other explosions. Yet just as Kazuma and Laliarina became certain of her innocence, Darkness with her house guards, or Chris in the audio drama, came to explain how the other explosions were caused when mine mushrooms growing around the countryside detonated in reaction to Megumin's explosions. So Megumin ended up throwing a tantrum while Kazuma admonished her and Laliarina arrested her. Early Spring Arc. As spring approached, Megumin with Darkness tried to drag Kazuma out of his warm kotatsu he shut himself in and set Aqua as a bad example, before Kazuma agreed to take a quest against lizard runners. Megumin later followed him to a blacksmith for picking up his custom-made sword, which she, without Kazuma's permission, branded the name Chunchun Maru on, claiming that it sounded cool. Then when the quest began to go wrong because the lizard runners prematurely charged toward the party, Megumin tried casting Explosion at them, only to discover that she was unable to since she had been drain-touched earlier on. Following Kazuma's death from falling and his refusal to come back to life even with Aqua resurrecting him, the impatient Megumin managed to force him into returning by graffitiing onto his crotch the words Holy Sword Excalibur, with an arrow pointing downward, much to the shock of the other girls. With him initially none the wiser to which she specifically did, she decided to go report the success of their quest before staying at the inn Yunyun was residing at for a couple of days instead of returning to the mansion, where Kazuma would inevitably come after her in fury once he realized what she had done. Megumin returned to the mansion when she reckoned that Kazuma should have calmed down, only to see him acting weird by behaving and speaking like an affluent entrepreneur, something which freaked Megumin out despite him having forgiven her. Accordingly told by Darkness how Vanir had offered to pay Kazuma 30 million Eris in exchange for the ideas of all the products he had designed, Megumin became further aghast when Kazuma and Aqua refused to take quests and suggested hiring adventurers to assassinate the Devil King instead. Unable to depend on Aqua or Darkness to save Kazuma from trashiness, at him citing his neck injury as an excuse to rest, Megumin suggested that he go on a healing vacation to the hot springs in Arkenledia, hoping to cure him of laziness by making him fight some undead attracted by Aqua. With Kazuma and Aqua unexpectedly concurring in excitement, Megumin, already having experienced the perils along the way over there, also suggested suggested that they take Darkness along with them. When the party set out the next day for their vacation to Arkenledia along with Wiz, whom Kazuma had brought along, the Crimson Demon was enamored to discover a pet baby red dragon also being transported in the carriage they were traveling in. During the attack by running Hawkites, which chased after the party's carriage that Kazuma directed them toward a nearby cave, Megumin waited until all of the charging monsters jumped over the darkness, dumped out the cave mouth, and disappeared inside, before wiping out the whole flock with an explosion. After the caravan set out the following morning with the permission of its master, who was impressed by the party's exploits, Megumin named the baby dragon Jarippa. During the rest of the trip, she questioned Kazuma's staring at Wiz, as well as came up with games to pass the time. Finally setting foot in Arkenledia again, Megumin forlornly bid farewell to Jarippa, before finding crowds of Axis followers trying to convert their party. When Aqua next proclaimed heading for the Axis Order's main cathedral, the concerned Megumin volunteered to accompany her, only to be hounded all the way by Axis followers enacting crazily enhanced versions of the conversion tactics she had previously taught Zesta. So by the time the pair reached their destination to discover the Pontiff absent, Megumin was left a traumatized wreck who shivered and babbled by the corner, until Kazuma and Darkness later collected her and brought her back to the inn. Despite expressing disinterest when Kazuma called for taking a dip in the hot springs, she still took Chomusuke to join Darkness as they later enjoyed the women's baths. The two of them then started discussing Kazuma before uttering some provocative lines to lure said pervert into eavesdropping by the fence separating the women in mixed baths, so that Darkness could punch him. This, however, set off a throwing battle between the baths, in which Megumin threw Chomusuke as one of the projectiles. At breakfast the next morning, Megumin paid little heed to Aqua's claims of the Devil King's army conspiring against the Axis Order by sabotaging the hot springs, and instead asked Kazuma to take her for an explosion trip outside of the city, which Wiz also accompanied them on. While strolling through the streets, Megumin inquired Wiz if she knew any other busty women in the Devil King's army who could cast explosion magic, though the Lich couldn't think of anyone like that as of her last stay at the Devil King's castle. Following breakfast in the anime, Megumin accompanied Kazuma to go strolling in the streets, where they munched on Arkan manjus and got harassed again, then later witnessed at the lakeside a maddened Hans venting his frustration toward the Axis Order, before Wiz ran up to join the two of them. With Wiz scaring away the nearby monsters, Megumin chose to randomly cast her explosion, which ended up decimating some hiding kobolds and attracting a beginner's bane, though Wiz easily defeated the beast. Walking back with the others after Kazuma recharged her, she next witnessed Aqua's failed attempt at preaching about the danger facing the city, and decided to leg it upon Aqua's proclamation as the Axis Order's goddess, inviting nothing but anger from her followers. In the anime, she joined the others when the gang had to escape the inn that night because a mob of Axis followers came to lynch Aqua. The following morning, when it was revealed that the prime poisoning suspect the party managed to pinpoint had actually blurted out his plot some days ago when Kazuma was eavesdropping, only to have the cowardly adventurer keep it under wraps in an attempt to avoid trouble, Megumin and Darkness furiously helped Aqua gang up on him. Later, at the local adventurer guild, she assisted Kazuma with using Darkness's noble status for persuading the employees into looking for the culprit, subsequent to which they had a discussion of nobility and their relationship with her as they made their way back to the inn. On the gang's way up the next day to the main spring situated in the mountains behind the main cathedral, the Crimson Demon quipped at Kazuma over his low levels. Following the gang discovering Hans in the act of poisoning the source reservoir, Megumin had to chase after Kazuma, fleeing in panic after he discovered how the deadly poison slime was actually a deadly adversary, in addition to being a Devil King's general, before she was forced to follow Aqua, who turned back to go fight. Because using explosion would simply splatter the poison slime around and cause widespread contamination, she was unwilling to cast it even as the deadly poison slime reverted to his true monstrous form, until Kazuma told her to go ahead as part of his plan to defeat the Devil King's general. Subsequent to the party's return to Axel, Megumin started playing a board game with Aqua until Yunyun came knocking. In the anime, upon returning to the party's mansion where Yunyun had been waiting for days alongside a cartload of gifts, Megumin agreed to a contest with her and later spent a long period in Axel before going back to the Crimson Demon Village. At some point during this period, Megumin became attracted to a herbivorous red-eyed beginner's bane that got captured by adventurers, spending days visiting its cage and even attempting to make Chomusuke its mate, until Akudo, with whom she had an argument, came to take the exotic monster away, following which Megumin cast an explosion that covered for the intelligent beast's escape. In the audio drama, Megumin threatened to cast explosion when Kazuma wouldn't come out of the toilet she desperately needed, then along with the other girls tore up Kazuma's diary because they didn't like how he had portrayed them. Accompanying Kazuma to Japan with the others through a magic item that takes people to the other world for 12 hours but wipes their memories upon return, Megumin found the honking of horns during rush hour amusing, before she got fascinated by fast food and brought to Akihabara by train, which excited her despite having to help Aqua when her Hagoromo got caught in the train door. Later, surprised by a talking vending machine that Aqua bought juice from, Megumin tried to rescue the little people inside the gaming machines at a gaming center Kazuma brought them to. She was accordingly asked by some otaku photographers who thought her a cosplayer to pose for for them, before becoming impressed at Kazuma dominating the fighting games. Though in the audio drama, her casting a weakened explosion while posing and blowing the sign off the Toranawana building sent a horrified Kazuma hurrying his party away. After nightfall, Megumin and the others accompanied Kazuma back to his home, but while waiting outside as instructed by Kazuma, who went inside, the trio found themselves questioned by police, at whom Megumin displayed aggression. The party was at that moment transported back to the parallel world as the effects of the magic item ran out, leaving them with no recollection of the events that transpired. Taken for a daily explosion routine by Kazuma, Megumin became horrified when he bought a baby sling from Vanir to facilitate carrying her back, and consequently refused to talk with Kazuma for days. Her anger subsided several days later when munching on the potato barons brought back by Aqua, and suggested the possibility of nightmares causing a string of suspected nightmare incidents in the city's inns. Following Kazuma's encounter with Zatu Ozuma and his party, Megumin was teased that night by Aqua, who called her Megumi. Then when Ozuma and party came knocking the next morning and called out Kazuma for his lies, she tried to charge out and teach them a lesson from getting her teased, only to be restrained by darkness. Later, taking advantage of Kazuma's retaliation to gang up on Megumi with Aqua, upon Darkness being brought to tears by Larkless, accusing her of being an imposter, Megumin challenged them to make a name in Axel as adventurers. 2 weeks later, Megumin, accompanied by Kazuma to the guild, where Ozuma's party had against her expectations become the star, when an adventurer was carried in sporting serious wounds inflicted by white wolves. As everyone all went back to fight the pack sporting numbers that alarmed Ozuma's party, Megumin surprised them by wiping out all the white wolves with an explosion. Though following the cleansing of the pack, she and her party had to apologize to Ozuma's party upon hearing of how their misdeeds caused trouble to the similarly named party. When storm season approached, Megumin was asked by the guild staff and other adventurers for fighting off the great spirit of the storm, so she tried using it as leverage to blackmail them for more prestige, in addition to canceling the nickname they gave her, until quickly accepting because Kazuma suggested they look to Yunyun instead. Dressed in the traditional water-resistant suits of the Crimson Demons, she and Megumin gathered with other adventurers at the lake where the spirit manifested. After swimming into the lake in preparation for striking the final blow at the spirit, Megumin was advised by Kazuma to prepare her spell on the shore instead. Subsequent to him dragging Aqua back, Megumin, under his instructions, unleashed an explosion on the Great Spirit of the Storm as part of the combination attacks to pacify its temper. Megumin was excited when Kazuma accepted a quest from Luna in the presence of Ran to some ancient ruins for fighting against a Titan Golem, which she refused to harm because it looked so cool, until Aqua promised to make her a better one, though after collapsing from her explosion, the Titan Golem self-detonated. Later, busy with anticipating a model Dendro maiden created out of milk cartons by Aqua, Megumin nevertheless agreed to help on the quest for searching for the underground facility of the ruins. Subsequent to sifting through some old Japanese commodities and listening to Aqua recite the diary of the head researcher, she panically cast an explosion at a sadistic pretty girl golem released by Kazuma, which caused great damage to the ruins that the party had to pay for. Back at the guild that night, she observed in amusement with the other girls how Kazuma discovered that Ran was paid to pose as his fan. Cursed Ring Arc. While bickering with Kazuma as he was carrying her back from an explosion session one day, upon him picking up a ring from the ground, Megumin advised having it assessed at Wiz's shop in case it was cursed. With Yunyun paying another visit there shortly after their arrival, Megumin refused her self-proclaimed rival's challenge and smacked Yunyun's breasts, before being told by Wiz about the ring possessing some effect that she couldn't ascertain. On the following morning, when Kazuma came running to the girls in panic over the cursed ring which he had slipped on becoming stuck onto his finger, Megumin instead got disgusted into nearly casting explosion at him after seeing the panties he had stolen during the night. Accompanying him to Wiz's shop, where she heard Vanir explain the ring's history, as well as how it forces its wearer to steal panties upon every full moon, she agreed to help Kazuma earn the 30 million Eris Vanir charged for removing the ring, and held meetings with the other girls in addition to Wiz, Yunyun, and Chris to discuss the matter. After Kazuma still stole a panty despite all the girls staying somewhere else for the night, Megumin complied with Kazuma's idea of earning Vanir's curse removal fee through working at his maid cafe dressed up as a maid server, where some customers found her vituperation of them attractive, though circumstances soon forced it to close. Megumin tried to catch Kazuma after he woke up from stealing panties again, though he managed to escape through the window. She anyhow agreed to become part of Kazuma's team for participating in the sports festival held by the guild that offers a stupendous prize enough to pay the fee, and participated in the swimming training at the Riverhead Lake. On the day of the sports festival, Megumin managed to stay on track during a giant toad attack as adventurers raced across the grasslands. Yet, subsequent to the discovery of brutal alligator hatchlings in the lake snapping at the swimsuits of competitors swimming through it, Megumin let loose an explosion that furthermore agitated the surrounding monsters, resulting in the festival being cancelled. Following a discussion during breakfast among the girls over what to do about Kazuma after he stole panties again, where Megumin advised casting explosion on his finger without considering the collateral damage, she, in response to him suggesting selling light novels, proposed writing about the adventures of a protagonist with multiple conflicting chunibyo settings. This spurred Kazuma into scrapping the project. With Kazuma settling for making money through starting a singer idol unit, Megumin, following idol training, was assigned to be the Chunibyo member of the unit named Shiny Blue, though it was soon forced to disband due to circumstances. The morning following the night something powerful tried to break into the mansion, only to be repelled by the magic barrier Aqua had erected, Megumin and the others tailed Aqua, who charged into Wiz's shop to confront Vanir, where the archdemon teased her into attempting an explosion until darkness restrained her. Then, despite declining to accompany Kazuma on a quest to seek stolen antiques in a cave used by thieves as a hideout and forcing him to go with Chris and Yunyun instead, she still followed Aqua into trailing him along with Darkness and Wiz, which resulted in them two falling through a trapdoor into a deeper part of the cave system. She later joined the whole gang as they tried to sneak past the Skull Dragon sleeping by the exit, only to have it woken by the ring, then after they managed to make it outside, cast an explosion which collapsed the cave. This action, however, not only failed to trap the Skull Dragon that managed to escape before leaving, but also doomed the quest to failure. After failing to retrieve the panties Kazuma had been forced by the curse to steal at the next full moon, Megumin agreed to help earn the fee through working odd jobs. Several days later, when the Skull Dragon was seen making its way toward Axel and had a bounty put on it, Kazuma, after hearing from Vanir of its origins, assigned Megumin to cast explosions alongside Wiz at the approaching Skull Dragon to weaken it. Subsequent to the ensuing deal made with the mage's soul in the Skull Dragon by offering up the stolen panties and its purification by Aqua, the consequently enraged Megumin took part in the beating that sent Kazuma to Eris and forced Aqua to resurrect him again. Following the series of possible rewards and penalties for Kazuma depending on his performance in the panty judgments, Megumin might go on an explosion session carrying a small bag of cookies that she had baked, then bickering with Kazuma as he was carrying her back, accordingly advising him to take the ring he had picked off the ground for assessment to Wiz's shop in case it was also cursed. When absent-mindedly asking Vanir a question about the ring, which contained a weak curse originating from regrets, however, she instead got a huge assessment fee slapped upon her, something the archdemon, upon Wiz's pleading, offered to cancel if she helped him break the curse at a church of Eris. Accompanying Kazuma to check out said church, where he came up with various scary theories about why it was empty, Megumin found them both trapped within the structure by the curse. Next, seeing bloody words appearing on a wall instructing them to hold a wedding ceremony so the curse would be lifted, she refused to comply even if for masquerading purposes. Declining the bread they found in the church in fear of it being cursed too, Megumin produced the cookies for them to dine on. After taking a shower that night, however, Kazuma barged in on her while she was still naked, before she irately looked around for the ghost that spooked him as well. Asking for his company to the toilet before sleeping, Megumin too witnessed the bride ghost, and thus asked Kazuma to go to bed with her in the church's bedroom. She, however, woke up hours later to find herself cursed into donning a wedding dress she could not remove, thus finally agreeing with the awakened Kazuma to hold a wedding ceremony. Through some trial and error with the ceremonial procedures at the chapel, they ended the ceremony with Kazuma slipping the ring onto Megumin, as well as both swearing fealty to the other, following which the curse lifted in a peal of bells. Heading back home in her own clothes minus the ring and determined to keep the day's events a secret, Megumin either followed her party back to the church only to have all the girls cursed by other resident bride ghosts into donning wedding dresses, while Wiz at Vanir's behest delivered more rings for sale, or went to Wiz's shop for a shopping spree at Kazuma's expense. At some point during that period, Kazuma died again during one of their quests, and following resurrection, he shut himself up inside the kotatsu so his party members won't get him killed again. After the girls failed to drive him out, Megumin, as part of their plan, joined Kazuma in the kotatsu to laze around, and succeeded in making him go on quests once again once he realized there'd be nobody to earn food and money. Magical Stones Arc. After her board game match with Darkness got overturned by Kazuma with an explosion, Megumin made to teach him what a real explosion looks like then and there, until Aqua returned from her walk with a shard of glassic stone. Detecting an enormous amount of magic being emitted from the shard, the Crimson Demon advised getting it assessed, and so followed the others to Wiz's shop, where Vanir, upon inspection, declared the shard to be part of a larger magical stone, which he offered to buy for millions of Eris. Accompanying Aqua with the others to the neighborhood ruins where she found the shard, Megumin pretended not to notice Yunyun, who had hid nearby, until she popped out to challenge her. Initially refusing the challenge, at Kazuma's persuasion, Megumin eventually agreed to a fast speaking contest, yet during Yunyun's turn, she caused a distraction to make her lose. Subsequent to the party defeating a muncher at the deepest part of the ruins, Megumin deduced that the magical stone they accordingly unearthed had made the nearby monsters more powerful. Back at Wiz's shop, once Vanir revealed that the stone contained enough magic to blow away entire cities, Megumin called for the party to keep it instead of sell it. Later heading to the guild with her party for discussing the matter, she became overjoyed to hear from Chris that there were more of those devil-sealing magical stones out there. While asking around for clues to the magical stones at the guild the next day, Wiz brought the party a magical stone detection device commissioned by Vanir that pointed them to Keel's dungeon, where Luna had offered them an undead subjugation quest. Upon reaching the dungeon entrance, Megumin again made to stay outside, yet Kazuma teased her about it, so she became riled up enough that she cast an explosion then and there, which collapsed the entrance and nearly killed the whole party. Forced to apologize because Kazuma threatened to use steel on her, the recharged Megumin became astounded when the magic from the stone permeating the dungeon restored the entrance to normal, prompting Megumin to follow the party inside now that her explosions wouldn't cause a cave-in. Later, as they searched for the dungeon, in the process running into Mitsurugi who agreed to join in their hunt for the magical stones, the party fought unnaturally numerous waves of undead after advancing into a secret passageway beyond Keel's chamber, where they were then faced by the Devil Geiger, leading the undead attracted to the dungeon by the magical stone. Subsequent to defeating the Devil Geiger and the discovery of their objective, the party returned to the guild for hearing more about the magical stones from Chris, who offered to join their search. Itching to head for the Temple of Everlasting Summer, where the next magical stone was located, Megumin accompanied Kazuma to Wiz's shop before getting teleported to the scorching desert. Subsequent to the party defeating what was guarding the magical stone, she brought up Chomusuke as a candidate for splitting the stones in an attempt to obtain an extra share. Megumin next followed the party to the ancient ruins where they met Ran, and followed them into the research facility underneath, where upon reaching the deepest level, she became awed by the Gun Falcon DX standing in the party's way. Reluctantly participating in fighting it, the Crimson Demon was further impressed when it split up to reveal Gun Falcon BX, though like before she was forced to help destroy it, much to her sorrow. During the party's crab pot dinner that night, Megumin again attempted to drink bubbly, only to be thwarted. Trudging through the snowfield forest where the next magical stone was hidden, Megumin proudly showed off how she warded off the cold by tucking Chomusuke inside her clothes like a portable heater. After the party defeated the Dera Mamo that appeared at the depths of the snowy dungeon, she cast an explosion on the ice covering the magical stone there, which in addition to their objective also dug out a hot spring, something all their companions at Axel were accordingly invited to. Following the party the next day, when Luna granted them special permission to explore the Mystery Tower, Megumin and her party members along with Wiz made their way up the tower, which surprisingly had Axis followers roaming the entrance level and other monsters similar to those they had previously fought further up. She accordingly had to fight a giant toad ghost that brought out her trauma with giant toads, and then on the top floor was faced with the physical illusions of Beldia and Hans, who thanks to Kazuma's instructions they were able to defeat. Following Hans's failed attempt to kill Aqua as part of his final act, Beldia rolled his head to peek up some girls' skirts before being stomped from existence. Aqua later picked up the magical stone powering the tower, causing the tower to begin to disappear, at which Kazuma used her Hagoromo as a parachute for everyone until Wiz teleported them all to safety. Megumin heard on the next day how the mystery tower had reappeared overnight, something she went back reporting to Kazuma. Shocked by Vanir's revelation to the party later at the guild about the dungeon containing the final magical stone moving around, she also heard Senna's announcement to all adventurers about a moving dungeon appearing, and followed alongside her companions who agreed to explore that dungeon after Vanir offered to pay extra for 7 magical stones. Astounded by the sheer amount of magic permeating the atmosphere of the town dungeon, described by Kazuma as a Shangri-La, Megumin ran off to inquire about a powerful magic from a Celestian in the distance soon after the party entered, only to find a puppet that, like the fruits growing on the trees, was artificially created. She accordingly chased after Kazuma, who had gone ahead without her, only to discover him attacked by the doll copies of their party, so she joined up with Aqua and Darkness to help him defeat the imposters, though Kazuma found her doll copy, which had been casting advanced magic, to be more competent than the real Megumin. The doll master who created the dungeon and carried the magical stone then showed up before telling them its sad story of being discarded by the little girl it was gifted to because of its disgusting appearance, something Megumin totally agreed with the little girl on. Forced to fight again because Aqua enraged the doll master, the party still managed to defeat all the dolls and retrieve the magical stone. Feeling excited the next day over the rumor regarding the 7 magical stones being able to grant any wish once they are all assembled at an altar on the island in the sky, Megumin accompanied the party to Wiz's shop for help getting up there, which resulted in them all taking a terrifying trip through the air before she and her party with Wiz and Vanir in tow made their way through the island. Following the devil sealing magical stones being placed on the altar and the imitation dragon getting released just as Vanir had schemed, Megumin, along with Darkness, warned the others while they were preoccupied with Aqua and Vanir's squabble of the monster's hostility before it began attacking the party, who barely fought their way out of the island in the sky thanks to Wiz freezing the rampaging beast. Fleeing back to the grasslands outside Axel, Megumin helped Kazuma uncover the shard of magical stone that Aqua had smuggled back with her, following which the shard attracted the imitation dragon right to their location. With the imitation dragon rampaging at the gates of Axel, Megumin got her wish of having somebody help them when the commotion attracted the gathering of adventurers who accompanied them on their search of the magical stones. During the fierce battle, Megumin helped persuade Aqua to let Kazuma smash her shard, which had been transferring power to the imitation dragon for it to regenerate from its wounds. In the final stages of the battle, under Kazuma's instructions, Megumin unleashed Explosion to utterly obliterate the imitation dragon. Later, with Vanir being unapologetic over starting the whole ordeal, Megumin along with Aqua and Darkness ganged up on him. She consequently joined the other adventurers in celebrating their victory at the guild. Black Slab Arc. Having wasted her explosion on a disastrous quest, Megumin, on the party's way back, picked up a black stone slab she became infatuated with while Aqua picked up a gem. After the party had Wiz assess the black slab at her shop, Megumin, upon being told how it could generate clothing when provided with ingredients and magical power, encouraged Aqua to use the gem and some of Wiz's sleeping perfume as a test, while Darkness was fantasizing, which created a set of high-quality sleepwear for young girls. She was terrified the following morning, however, when Darkness's personality changed to that of a sadist, at which Kazuma told her about the newly discovered curse of the slab. Subsequently told by Senna that their party was accused of theft by a nobleman who offered to pardon them from banishment if they could generate within the deadline a set of clothing that makes the wearer envious, Megumin, in a panic, tried to blow everything up as Kazuma tried to stop her. Though with Darkness affected by the curse, she then agreed to use the black slab coupled with some clothing recipes from Vanir that were concocted by a man in black robes as well as the archdemon himself. Spending the ensuing weeks in a cycle of the whole party working several days on odd jobs and quests for ingredients, followed by rest and clothing generation, she, despite suffering increasingly scary penalties from Darkness, still found the idea of the Crusader learning to attack quite attractive, until Chris told them about her friend shopping for whips. Megumin soon couldn't stand it when Darkness began forcing the party into survival training in case they needed to flee into the wild, and tried to escape one session, albeit unsuccessfully, though she was saved after the curse was broken once Darkness whipped Kazuma while wearing leather last. Soon afterwards, the party used the black slab for generating the requested school Invidia, in the meantime of which Megumin became enraged when conversation about the party's future drifted to Kazuma teasing her over her flat-chested body. Megumin the next day went to visit Wiz's shop where the awaiting Yunyun challenged her over body development, something that Megumin declared herself the winner on according to her new belief that flat-chested bodies are better. Returning to the mansion where she expressed happiness at Kazuma calling her a lolly girl but was avoided by Chomusuke, she then asked him to help with spreading lollyism only to be refused. Next, being informed of Senna visiting the mansion over the school Invidia getting stolen and the nobleman now demanding a new set of clothes from the party, Megumin reluctantly assisted with gathering ingredients even as she dragged Yunyun off to fulfill her new mission of establishing a Lolita alliance. Although she was unable to persuade Kazuma into joining, when Aqua suggested her give a speech promoting lollyism, Megumin was surprisingly promised support from Kazuma. Faced with a big audience outside the city gate on the day she was to announce the Lolita Alliance's establishment, the jittery Megumin was presented the pure doll to wear, allowing her to deliver a fiery speech expressing the pure ideals of lollyism and breaking the curse of the black slab on her in the process, though she nearly cast Explosion on some enthusiastic audience praising her flat-chested body, before returning to the mansion in embarrassment for a celebratory dinner. Soon afterwards, the party used the black slab to generate the requested idol Superbia, but several days since it was sent out, Senna came to tell the party of its theft, which occurred at the same time the outside mercenaries hired to boost security were attacked on the road by summoned monsters. Subsequent to Senna dropping off another clothing request from the nobleman before leaving, Aqua confessed how she helped a man in black robes attract monsters that delayed the mercenaries on the road, an act the others realized had made them accomplices to the theft. The next day, Megumin followed the others to hear from Wiz more details on the curse, and the results made the party reckon that it was Aqua's turn to be cursed with feeling no desire, a situation both Megumin and Darkness found especially troublesome to break. Proceeding to help the party work for ingredients all over again, Megumin, after one tiresome day of work, expressed the desire to have her feelings healed through sleep despite it being her turn to clean the bathroom, only to have Kazuma unexpectedly volunteer to perform it in her place. Later, she came up with the idea for the party to pretend losing the recipes before waiting to ambush the man in black robes at Wiz's shop when he brought replacements. Though following her dozing off during the ambush, Aqua, wearing sexy formal, instead purified the robe doll possessed by undead that showed up. The party, anyhow, continued working to generate the requested sexy luxuria for buying more time. Yet, after a successful delivery, the nobleman came up with more excuses to make them generate an additional set of clothes, at which Kazuma comforted Megumin and Darkness in an unprecedented fashion, making the girls girls realize that it was him who got cursed. Following some discussion between Megumin and the other girls, as well as a bit of experimentation, the three of them came to the conclusion that the curse which should have hit Aqua got rebounded by her godly aura onto Kazuma, causing him to desire healing the feelings of everyone but Aqua. Wiz then delivered some new clothing recipes, despite the culprit who concocted them supposedly vanquished by Aqua already, but the party nevertheless started working for its ingredients. Days later, Megumin heard new clues from Kazuma about how the culprit in black robes was actually still alive, before being told by Aqua that Kazuma needed to give them a relaxing massage for the curse on him to break. Then, after several massages failed to break the curse, at Aqua's advice, she and Darkness let Kazuma massage them without feeling defensive so the curse could be broken before it became permanent. Troubled because Kazuma requested that they wear charming roomwear, of which there was only one set and didn't fit her petite body, the predicament was solved when Aqua suggested Megumin wear the girls' sleepwear generated in the slab's test run. She and Darkness proceeded to get a relaxing massage from Kazuma together, and so the curse was eventually lifted, following which the party continued gathering ingredients for the requested Berserk Aira as part of Kazuma's plan to catch the man in black robes. One night before the deadline, the party ambushed and captured the man in black robes when he sneaked into their mansion to steal the ingredients. Yet, when trying to generate the Berserk Aira requested by the nobleman, it turned out that the recipe given to them was actually for generating the self-autonomous armor of Wrath. After Darkness struggled to hold back the moving armor to prevent it from wreaking havoc on the world before putting it on as part of Kazuma's plan, Megumin, who still didn't understand why the thief wanted the clothing ingredients, followed her to the uninhabited grasslands outside Axel, and subsequently to Darkness stripping off the armor of Wrath, cast an explosion on it that rendered the wrathful armor inert. Next, witnessing the escaped man in black robes, who wasn't even an adventurer, gather the clothes generated from his recipes as ingredients for a powerful set of clothes and could empower him to kill the nobleman, in accordance with Kazuma's instructions, she and the other girls waited until he put on the stolen clothes generated by the man before ripping it off from his dead body. After everything was settled, with her having tested out enough numbers of various clothes, Megumin, as she took Kazuma on her explosion routine, talked about Chomusuke, who had been viciously squabbling with Aqua, being attracted to them. She, however, became concerned when the cat was nowhere to be found a few days later and turned hysterically dejected once several more days passed, prompting the party to search the city for Chomusuke. While asking around with Darkness for places where cats gather though, Megumin heard some meowing from a church, so chasing all the occupants out and barricading herself within, she ransacked the place in search of Chomusuke. Yet, subsequent to Kazuma and Darkness sneaking in, it was revealed that the meowing heard by Megumin was from some other cat. Megumin's apology for the trouble caused led Kazuma to check every gap between buildings. Then, at Kazuma teasing her lack of breasts becoming handy, squeezed herself into a narrow gap and pretended she was stuck, only for her to really become trapped. Continuing their search, after Kazuma pulled Megumin out, she chose to postpone explosions until Chomusuke is found while they talked about understanding Cat's feelings. Next, seeing a box drifting down the river, Megumin thought that Chomusuke was inside and dove in after it, only to nearly drown until Kazuma rescued her. And while drying out at the guild later on, she recounted how close she was to Chomusuke. With the party returning to the mansion without success, the distraught Megumin, blaming herself for not understanding Chomusuke's feelings, demanded Kazuma to use the black slab for generating clothes that make her into a cat. Consequently, putting on what Kazuma described as clothes of the cat god, she, under his instructions, embarrassingly acted like a cat, only to be doubly shocked when Yunyun showed up with Chomusuke. Prevented by Kazuma from attacking Yunyun for kidnapping the cat and witnessing her in an embarrassing state, Megumin heard how Aqua had tricked Yunyun into keeping Chomusuke with her for days because the archpriest hated the hostile cat, but remained overjoyed anyway at Chomusuke cozying up to her again, following which she might meow at Chomusuke while grooming her, only to notice Kazuma eavesdropping, or come out of the bath wearing only a perilously wrapped bath towel that Chomusuke hung on to right in Kazuma's path. Mid-spring arc. Megumin was shocked in the middle of her board game match with Aqua when Yunyun burst into the mansion asking to bear Kazuma's child, which wasn't the case in the anime since she was eating at the guild following her explosion, destroying the flying tuna her party had been tasked to catch, until Yunyun came to make the request, and expressed opposition upon Kazuma shamelessly complying. Before overturning the board game match, Aqua was obviously nagging her to continue. Next, hearing that the Crimson Demon village was about to be destroyed, Megumin read aloud a letter Yunyun had received from Hirapon, which on the first page spoke of the chief's imminent death because the village was under attack by overwhelming forces of the Devil King's army that was led by a Devil King's general, and the second page writing about Soketo foretelling the inevitable destruction of the village and all crimson demons except for Yunyun, who will marry an unremarkable and weak man she had met at the Town of Beginnings before bearing a child destined to defeat the Devil King. Although Megumin was initially distraught over her own demise, also foretold, in addition to Kazuma readily agreeing to help Yunyun with making the child, she then discovered that the second page was actually the first chapter of Heroic Tales of the Crimson Demons penned by Aru. This was sent in the same envelope as Hiropon's letter. Despite expressing nonchalance at her hometown being invaded and letting Yunyun leave the village alone, Megumin, following a mediocre explosion session with Kazuma, later cited Komeko as an excuse for having the whole party accompany her back to the village as well. Brought to Wiz's shop on the following day while in the process of excitedly shopping for supplies, Megumin heard Wiz recount how she had once visited her home 2 years ago in search of Hyoizabaru but only found Komeko, making the Crimson Demon realize how her apprehensiveness back then had made her family lose business. After the party was teleported by Wiz back to Arkenledia, she opposed staying around to wait for Yunyun. Then, during their ensuing trek along the trail to the Crimson Demon village, Megumin and the other girls fell for the allure of a Tranquility Girl, making her prevent Kazuma from cutting it down then and there, as well as getting mad at him after he later killed it. When the party made camp that night, with Megumin taking first watch alongside Kazuma, she began inquiring about the possibility of him returning to his homeland, where he had frequently led daring night raids, and once hearing about him unable to do so, held onto his hand before expressing her wish for all of them to continue to live together. She proceeded to fall asleep several minutes later, and afterwards got woken up by Kazuma in a way that made her weep. When the party reached the clearing upon the trail the following day, Megumin tried warning the Kazuma scouting ahead to flee from an orc, but to no avail. Subsequent to him defeating the orc, she informed the clueless Kazuma and Darkness of how the orcs, of which only females are left, will be lusting after his genes. After Yunyun rescued him from molestation by the orcs, Megumin became enraged when she criticized the uselessness of explosion magic, and so proceeded to tell Kazuma the embarrassing location where Yunyun's birthmark is located. Next, blaming Yunyun for their quarrel, attracting the attention of the nearby Onis, or goblins in the anime, working for the Devil King until subdued by Darkness, she took the opportunity to prove explosion magic's usefulness by casting one at close range to take out the nearby enemies, though Kazuma, who picked her up instead, gave her minus points for it. Subsequent to Bukorori and his vigilantes arriving on the scene to annihilate all the Onis, Megumin expressed displeasure at Kazuma doing an imitation of the introduction made by Bukorori in a stark contrast to his reaction as the one she made when they first met, before the vigilantes teleported everyone back to the village. After correcting Kazuma's misplaced awe at those NEET's abilities and giving him some simple explanation about the village and its people, she followed Yunyun back to the chieftain's home where Hiropon clarified the situation to be brighter than described in the letter. Later, Megumin, accompanied by her party to watch how the villagers easily fought off another attack from the Devil King's army led by Sylvia, though Kazuma's admiration at seeing the true Crimson Demons fight irritated her. Megumin eventually brought her party back to her home, only to have Komeko, who opened the door, scream about her older sister seducing a man back home. Exhausted by all the ordeals during the day, she soon fell asleep in the living room, yet upon waking up in her bedroom at night many hours later, Megumin became horrified to find Kazuma laying inside her futon too, courtesy of Yoyo's machinations. Despite finding her body untouched, she still lured Kazuma into admitting his intent of doing things to her, at which Megumin angrily escaped out the window and spent the rest of the night at Yunyun's house. Returning home early the next morning, Megumin told the other girls what happened over the night, then joined them in calling Kazuma names during breakfast. Eventually having her anger ebbed, once Kazuma treated her to a meal at the village's cafe, she took him and Aqua sightseeing at some tourist attractions around the village, such as the shrine, the sacred sword, the wishing pond, and the underground storage adjacent to the mysterious facility that was used for sealing a weapon said to be capable of destroying the world. Upon Kazuma expressing his discomfort over the storehouse's seal because she revealed about those used for sealing the Dark God and the Nameless Goddess failing, Megumin assured him how the seal in the underground storage required knowledge of an ancient language nobody could read anymore. She next took them to Chikara's shop and bought cloaks with Kazuma's money, and led them to the Hill of the Demon God, before following Kazuma back to her home when Sylvia led a raid by the Devil King's army from that direction. In the anime, Megumin, after collecting the cloaks she had ordered from Chikara, took Kazuma and Aqua to see Red Prison, where she and Yunyun donned their old school uniforms and introduced her party members to Aru, Funifera, and Dodanko. Then, on the trio's way back, talked about how Yunyun learned intermediate magic to save Komeko, following which they noticed Sylvia's attack. That night, after Kazuma scared the Devil King's general away, Megumin packed up to sleep at Yunyun's place again while telling off Yoyoi for selling her out to Kazuma, only to have her own mother snare her ankle before putting her to sleep. She soon woke in outrage once it became clear that Kazuma was sleeping in her room beside her, but became subdued upon him clarifying not having done anything, and instead thanked him for all his efforts at picking up after her messes. Proceeding to snuggle in the futon with Kazuma, Megumin, despite being infuriated by him freezing the window barring her escape, still expressed agreement to advance their relationship. Interrupted by a sudden alert sounding about a night raid by the Devil King's army, once Yoyoi unlocked the door, Megumin hurried outside after Kazuma, who had run into Sylvia. Next, seeing Kazuma's Chunchun Maru failing to deal damage to Sylvia, as well as the Devil King's general still thinking the katana to be Mitsurugi's gram, she irately blurted out the weapon's true name for all to hear. Soon, Megumin became exasperated by Kazuma enjoying being taken hostage between Sylvia's huge breasts, although she still considered rescuing him even when he threatened to defect, and attempted to comfort Kazuma upon Sylvia confessing to be a growth chimera who was partly male. Later alerting Yunyun and Bukorori's vigilantes, Megumin and the others sometime afterwards followed Sylvia to the underground storehouse for storing weapons where Kazuma was taken to, and expressed puzzlement at how the Devil King's general, whom Kazuma had trapped within the storage containing the weapons nobody knew how to use anymore, managed to break the seal in the first place. She then panically dragged Kazuma and the others into fleeing alongside the villagers to the Hill of the Demon God due to Sylvia breaking out merged with the Mage Killer and raising the village. Later explaining to Kazuma about how none of the Crimson Demons can fight that magic negating weapon, as well as nobody knowing how to use the counter weapon against it, Megumin stayed back in reserve while he took Aqua to search for the counter weapon in the underground storehouse during the distraction brought on Sylvia by darkness and the villagers. In the anime, she accompanied him and Aqua to some nearby ruins that Aru suggested may contain clues about the weapon, though the entire time Kazuma was reciting the engraved script on a slab that was indecipherable to her, she didn't hear what was read because for some reason he kept her ears blocked. Only realizing at this point that Komeko wasn't among the evacuated, Megumin rushed home while Yunyun was distracting Sylvia in order to collect her sister who was sleeping. The sisters soon rendezvoused with her party members carrying the railgun and returned to where Yunyun was, then stopping Kazuma from interfering because she noticed the footsteps of invisible villagers creeping over to the rescue. Megumin became elated at the sight of the outlandish Yunyun finally introducing herself in the Crimson Demon's cool style without her usual bashfulness. Following Yunyun's successful escape, Megumin and her party were pursued by the furious Sylvia, who declared the Crimson Demons cowards, then subsequent to Komeko trading barbs with the Devil King's general by stating how powerful her older sister is, stepped up to challenge Sylvia. After hinting to Kazuma how she figured out that it was him who unlocked the seal in the underground storehouse, she tried casting an explosion at the Chimera, only for her magical power to be absorbed by the railgun, which became fully charged. In the anime, she afterwards had to be carried away by the others because Sylvia returned to life merged with the dead Beldia and Hans. Following the arrival of Riz and Vanir, Megumin and Yunyun had the other villagers' magical power transferred to them through the Lich, with which they launched a powerful explosion of saber at Kazuma, who had allowed himself to be absorbed by the Chimera and became her weak spot to obliterate them both. Megumin on the following day showed Kazuma around the village as it was being rebuilt, and was in turn shown by Aru the second chapter of Heroic Tales of the Crimson Demons, before being surprised by Kazuma suddenly tearing up the manuscript and quarreling with the dismayed Aru. Taking Kazuma to the hills outside the village on the next day, Megumin noticed Aqua engaged in a conversation with Pekko-nyan, who, like he had done for years towards his kin, went on and on about a jinx over the village. Trying later that night to dissuade Aqua from trying to help the weirdest old man of the Crimson Demons break the jinx, the flat-chested girl eventually agreed to aid the endeavor when warned of how it will stop her breasts from growing. Despite her being irritated by Kazuma asking Yunyun to accompany them on the following day because of her being more competent, Megumin anyhow got talked into making the trek deep into the forest where the boulder causing the jinx was located. Following a series of monster attacks, she was told by Aqua how the jinx on her was broken upon their first meeting, and realized how many unexplained phenomena around the villagers were the results of the jinx, and not their own unrestrained power. The gang eventually made it to the cursed boulder, though its jinx was broken by Aqua before Megumin could explode it. She was next shocked by the revelation of Pekko-nyan being a ghost who possessed a lecherous side. Then, alongside Yunyun, indulged in his final wish of fighting a powerful adversary, especially after he made taunts about her incompetency as an adventurer. Ignoring how Pekko-nyan's tornado and control of weather blew up her skirt and drenched her clothes, Megumin cast an explosion to send him into the afterlife without regrets. She, alongside her companions, afterwards munched on the watermelons left behind by the old man. On the night prior to the final day of Megumin's homecoming trip, she voluntarily let Kazuma sleep together with her all night, and heard him recount about a day in his country where girls have to gift boys they like with chocolate, prompting her to express her fondness. Then, still feeling guilty over her practically being useless against Sylvia, she asked if he wanted a competent wizard. Megumin proceeded to head outside with Kazuma on the following day, where she witnessed Yunyun being referred to by names derived from her introduction to Sylvia, and expressed discontent about the bashful loner now becoming the village celebrity. They were accordingly met by Funifera and Dodonko, who teased Megumin over her learning a gimmick spell, so in retaliation she introduced Kazuma to them as her boyfriend, in addition to listing some of their intimate actions in a misleading fashion, and successfully drove the pair off in tears. Next, forcing Yunyun to make arrangements for their teleportation back to Axel, Megumin led Kazuma to a field outside the village and handed him her adventurer card so that he could help her select to learn advanced magic. Yet to her surprise, the explosion she cast to be her last turned out to be much more powerful because Kazuma, who stated that he wanted the strongest wizard, instead expended these skill points to power up her explosion magic, and further delighted her by giving it 120 points. Upon return to their mansion, Megumin spoke up for Kazuma when the other girls chided him for lazing around, before the party was notified about the princess's request. While in the anime, she joined the party on a picnic after their return to Axel, where she asked Kazuma to make her learn advanced magic, but instead had her explosion powered up, and subsequent to that spent a long period on other things before the princess's arrival. At some point during this period, Megumin asked Kazuma out for a pretend date in order to discourage a boy seemingly stalking her out of affection, and despite the dating activities they performed lacking the mood, Megumin still felt happy with the time they spent together, before taking Kazuma out on an explosion session, though upon return discovered that the boy didn't like her at all and was simply hoping to learn explosion magic. Megumin also helped pursue a runaway rare miniature destroyer that Aqua and Kazuma tried to sell in secret, though it all ended up for naught. Cursed Relic Arc. When following Kazuma on a request by Lundberg to investigate an ancient relic discovered at the research facility beneath his mansion, only for the relic's defense responses to begin enacting a level drain on the party as well as the accompanying Yunyun, Chris, and Mitsurugi, Megumin climbed upon a pedestal before proceeding to break the haywire magic item according to Hyoizoburo's advice through an explosion. This resulted in a cave-in of the facility that nearly buried everyone alive, collateral damage on half of Lundberg's estate, the relic shutting down because of several broken parts, and Kazuma being charged by Senna for treason again. While striving to hide her shock at the team getting reduced to level 1 rookies with no skills, which meant that she could no longer cast explosions, Megumin tagged along to the meeting with Lundberg for discussing the terms of Kazuma's pardon. Whispering her lack of confidence in Rav, whom they were instructed to follow the directions of, she, in the middle of the researcher explaining to the party what was needed for repairing the relic, threw a tantrum because of an exclamation by Kazuma hit her sore spot of being unable to cast her soul spell, resulting in her getting dragged outside by darkness. Still refusing to cheer up, even when Aqua afterwards offered to make her a Dendro Maiden, Megumin accordingly had to give all of her money and advanced equipment to pay for the damages on Lundberg's estate. Taking the old road to the ruins, where even monsters roaming there now proved a challenge, the party reached the neighborhood ruins, at the entrance to which they recalled how their adventures with magical stones began when Aqua picked up a shard of them there. Despite being advised by Kazuma not to follow, Megumin still insisted on joining the others into the ruins. Journeying with the party through an uncomfortably humid underground sewer running beneath the ruins, Megumin, upon them reaching a junction blocked by masses of giant toads, expressed self-pity at her powerlessness at one of the amphibians gobbling her up, and ended up all slimy again subsequent to rescue. After the party's retreat back to Axel, Megumin cleaned herself up in the mansion's bathroom before returning to the underground sewers to position the frogicide purchased from Vanir. Later, at the storeroom where the pipe for repairing the relic was stored, she deduced that the giant king toad appearing in front of them had attracted all the giant toads into the sewers, following which she had also fought to defeat it. Despite the 5 of them later celebrating the completion of their first mission, Megumin still may grumble about her inability to cast explosions. Hearing from Rav on the following day about the magical stone of water needed for repairs being located in a dungeon near Arkenledia, she decided to keep custody of the magical power detection device handed to them by the researcher. As the party walked along the highway to the City of Water, Aqua showed hesitancy at returning to Arkenledia to look for the relic's replacement part in fear of its residents still resentful at her ruining their hot springs, so Megumin assured the uneasy archpriest how the people of Arkenledia would have forgotten about her ruining their hot springs by now, then suggested once the party trudged wearily into Arkenledia that they go look at a local product shop. Following the party's reunion with Chris, who had been scouting out the city beforehand, Megumin was surprised when the thief showed the party an Axis follower calling on the power of Aqua to split the waters of the lake in half and reveal an underwater temple. Soon entering the temple clearly built for worshipping Aqua to search for the replacement part, upon the party reaching a flooded hall in the inner sanctum from which the detection device got a reading, Megumin and the other girls wearing swimsuits provided by Aqua dove in to search. Frantically commenting when a kraken hugging the statue of Aqua surfaced before capturing Darkness and Chris, Megumin, following the hall being emptied of water, helped with defeating the monster. She proceeded to head out early the next morning, possibly for finding how to relearn explosion before imagining herself casting it, and upon her return to the party was told that the next replacement part was potentially located at the Crimson Demon Village. Later, as the party walked the trail to the Crimson Demon Village, Megumin expresses depression over her inability to cast explosions. When catching sight of Yunyun greeting them by the village entrance, however, she became jealous at the chief's daughter getting to take the easy way back through carriage and teleportation, citing how Yunyun, who had failed to glean any useful clues, should be the one foot slogging instead of her. Megumin went to Red Prison, where she either made inquiries or pleaded for Puchin to let her participate in farming so she could gain the experience needed for relearning Explosion, though both actions proved futile in the end. Megumin nevertheless invited her party to stay at home for the night and convinced her father, who became disappointed with Kazuma's plight, to help him find the replacement part, which happened to be in the possession of Komeko. After her sister refused her party members' appeals to hand over the slate that she had found first, Megumin eventually talked Komeko into giving it up on the condition that she's shown once more how cool her older sister is with her explosions. The following day, outside the village, Megumin, with Kazuma and Komeko watching, might pretend to cast explosion at monsters while the others supporting her from behind the stage generate simulated explosions, or simply cast explosions at no specific target, though either way, Komeko found the fireworks not cool enough. Megumin later heard a noise from the direction of the decayed fort close to the village, and upon following Kazuma to investigate, had to fight an attacking mecha owl. After the party reported to Hughes about their encounter with another one of the pests recently plaguing the village, Megumin, at Komeko's prompting, claimed how she would defeat all of these mecha owl monsters, though this got her dragged outside by Kazuma for a scolding about wasting their time until he changed his mind. When they set out into the fort the next day, however, Komeko insisted on tagging along, which forced Megumin to carry her sister around for the duration of the trip and rendered her unable to fight. Subsequent to several attacks by the constructs that Megumin came to name Mecha Owl Modified, during which she talked Komeko out of wearing Aqua's headpiece since the monsters were going for it, and instead persuaded the archpriest into continuing to wear the bait, the party successfully tracked the Mecha Owl monsters to a secured building in the middle of the fort. After the party descended into the facility ruins beneath the fort and fought to get past a door locked by a gamer code, Megumin, in the storage area beyond, went to look at the inactive mechanical construct looking like the mage killer that Darkness had discovered, during which she let Komeko roam free. Next, proclaiming her discovery of a big red button on the wall, she and Aqua began vying for the duty to push it, while Kazuma tried to stop them, giving Komeko the opening to push the panic button and cause the activation of the Mage Killer prototype, the flailing body of which they were helpless against in the enclosed space. Grabbing Komeko as she fled with her companions to outside the storage area, Megumin could only try and not get herself and her sister killed, while the others battled the Mage Killer prototype that Kazuma had trapped in the storage door. Forced to flee into the forest outside after the damaged construct still managed to drag itself free of the door and pursued the party. At Komeko's prompting and possible delivery of skill-up potions from her former classmates, Megumin proceeded to destroy the Mage Killer prototype using her relearned explosion. With the impressed Komeko handling over the metallic slate, Megumin, while preparing to leave, was told by Dodonko and Funifera that the latter was joining them on the journey. Like the rest of her party, when they headed over to search for the next replacement part, Megumin found out the hard way that Luna's warning about the snowfield forest turning lethally cold due to the overabundance of snow sprites was true after she could not stop shivering. Suggesting that they purchase heat rings following the party's return to Axel, she, due to the item being out of stock, went to catch and tame a salamander, and tucked the fiery but friendly reptile within her clothes upon the next trip into the snowfields, though Kazuma consequently forced her into using the hot ring he had bought. Later, the party discovered the path leading up to a mountain of ice and reunited with Mitsurugi, before heading back to Axel for preparations subsequent to Aqua slipping away on the ice before being recovered. Upon returning to the ice mountain with Mitsurugi being the guide and Aqua sliding out of the party to end up further ahead where the others had to collect her, Megumin followed them to the end of the dungeon, only to find the way back blocked by a gigantic big snow sprite that Kazuma forbade her to move with an explosion. Next, witnessing Aqua burning the snow sprites out of the big snow sprite with the flames of the salamander named Hamozo by Megumin, the Crimson Demon spurred on the Archpriest so that the conglomerate of spirits would be reduced to a more manageable size, which the party then defeated in order to claim the eternal ice crystal within for repairing the relic. After fleeing from the wrathful Winter Shogun back to Axel, where they presented the final replacement part to Rav, Megumin squabbled with Kazuma over the cuisines Lundberg invited the party and Senna to enjoy. Following the completion of repairs of the relic, Lundberg's proclamation of treason, Wallavy's release, as well as subsequent departure and Rav's betrayal plus escape, Megumin commented on Lundberg, who simmered in unspeakable fury before throwing a tantrum, then helped foil the nobleman's attempt to silence them all with a manatite golem. The next day, Megumin, having heard of Kazuma's treason charges being cleared, reminded the joyful Aqua that her Hagoromo was still missing. Soon seeing off the forgetful Archpriest, she and Darkness convinced Kazuma to go after Wallaby. Subsequent to Vanir bringing Wiz to help the party track down the magical creature, who had headed towards the Temple of Everlasting Summer, they all set out once Aqua came back. Then, following several green lizard runner attacks, Megumin suggested to her sweltering companions that she could blow away the sun or blast out water from the ground, but both suggestions ended up getting vetoed by Kazuma. When the party reached the oasis adjacent to the temple, at Aqua's insistence they all took a break, during which the girls splashed around in the water wearing new swimsuits. Soon afterwards, the party located Rav, who was observing an evolved wallaby regurgitating the monsters it had drained of magical power in order to grow bigger, then had to fight it before fleeing when the magical creature regenerated. Several days later, as the guild discussed the mysterious wallaby, the party received permission to enter Lundberg's mansion, where Megumin discovered a diary written in Japanese, though Kazuma later became too furious to tell her what he had read from the head researcher's diary. When the party went searching for the Great Tree Labyrinth for Rav at Vanir's advice, Megumin explained to Kazuma how the tree where the labyrinth was situated in had grown from a seed that fell from the Genbu, and expressed her wish to cast Explosion on the gigantic tortoise someday. Soon finding their way blocked by a cluster of thick branches, she was stopped by Kazuma from casting Explosion. Then, at Aqua's suggestion, they asked Wiz for a specially formulated weed killer, which despite wilting away the branches also enraged the ironwood tree ant that marked out its turf with them. The party accordingly defeated the monster and headed to the deepest part of the labyrinth, where they discovered another relic that Wallaby, now evolved to its second form, got directed there by Rav to absorb. Although they managed to fight off the attacking Wallaby, it still managed to absorb the relic and flee, while the party had to defeat the awakened guardian of the Great Tree. As the party worried about their future back at the guild in face of Wallaby's unstoppable growth, Aqua, while scouring the diary of the head researcher, discovered a hidden page talking about a counterweapon against it being hidden in the Magic Sealer Cave. Megumin proceeded to explain how the cave, which the Crimson Demons had been using as a training facility, can nullify the magics of archwizards and archpriests, before advising Kazuma to bring 2 or more Crimson Demons along. Acting as the guide while the party passed through the gate requiring 2 or more Crimson Demons in the party and fought giant spiders nesting around the 4 mechanisms for opening the way down, she, at the lowest level, went to operate a console with her other kin to unlock the door ahead, only to be ensnared by a web an Arachne had weaved, allowing Kazuma to look up their skirts from below. Proceeding to defeat the vengeful Arachne after Kazuma cut the Crimson Demons free, Megumin opened the way into the innermost room where the big crystal was located, before having to smash it because its defense mechanism was activated once the safe containing the counterweapon was touched. Then, upon them racing back to Axel, she tried stopping a giant wallaby who was advancing on the city with an explosion, and despite it failing to do so, it still revealed to Megumin that the wallaby's body could be melted by intense heat, before she participated in the battle, which eventually saw it defeated. Several days following the creature's defeat, Megumin was busy with winning at a young grandchild game against Aqua, when Senna burst into their mansion to notify them about small monsters looking like Wallaby popping up all over, so she had to join the party in heading to various dungeons and defeating the small wallabies they found. Taking part in the party's journey to the bottomless labyrinth from which the small wallabies had emerged, Megumin, piqued by a mocking sign at the entrance left by Rav, suggested blowing the whole place up until darkness stopped her. During the middle of their trek, when Darkness read another mocking sign, the party sends Aqua, who got captured by Guardian's sword, had to fight the golem when it activated. After the party discovered Rav at his hideout and listened to him recount how Wallaby had survived the prior battle as well as evolved, they were shocked at seeing a Wallaby bigger than ever on the move outside, then fought a Guardian cross which the mad scientist had left behind while he made his escape. When the party headed for the ancient ruins above the underground research facility as they followed the lead of Rav's whereabouts provided by Lundberg, the Titan Golem Type 2 stationed to guard the place stomped onto Darkness, impeding Megumin from casting Explosion until the Crusader crawled free and allowed the whole party to defeat it. Making it down to the deepest part of the facility where the magical stone had previously been found, the party followed a hidden door discovered by Aqua that led to a secret section. After the party pushed into the laboratory Rav was busy working in and defeated the small clones of Wallaby modified to grow spines, Megumin expressed exasperation upon Aqua helping Kazuma demonstrate the truth about Wallaby by eating the defeated clones. She, along with Darkness, next noticed on an observation device the main Wallaby, who had grown into supergiant proportions, heading straight towards Axel. After they all raced back to the city, Megumin took part in the plan Kazuma had formulated for fending against the approaching Wallaby. At some point during this period, Megumin heard of a rumor that a phoenix was sighted, and thought of taming it so she could coolly make history, and talked Kazuma into accompanying her to capture the legendary bird. Soon getting wind of a huge flying monster seen at a decayed fort, she brought Kazuma over only to find a chimera fighting with a fire drake. Following several more false leads, Megumin heard of some adventurers seeing the phoenix beyond a mirage at the Oasis of Everlasting Summer, though nothing was discovered when the pair got there. When trying to hear the fluttering of the phoenix sometime later, she was told by a merchant about an old man who claimed seeing the phoenix and went to meet him at the neighborhood ruins, in the vicinity of which the phoenix had reportedly hatched in an explosion 94 years ago. Yet, when looking into a cave that the old man thought he had recently seen the phoenix in, they instead found an aggressive black griffin that Megumin defeated with an explosion, making the old man realize how he he'd been mistaking explosion magic to be the birth of the Phoenix. Although the Phoenix in the end wasn't found, Megumin, while being carried back by Kazuma, expressed contentment at the old man praising her explosion magic and her becoming part of what legends are made of, advising other magic users to lay an ambush along the roadside for bogging the advancing Wallaby and place through bottomless swamp before it could get any closer to Axel. Megumin, choosing to deploy on high ground herself, waited until Kazuma and his companions fought and weakened the beast, before unleashing explosion on the spot. Yet, in addition to the core surviving because Rav had inserted inside it the sturdy relic for its protection, the power of Megumin's explosion was absorbed by the Wallaby to fuel its evolution into a mutated form. Anyhow, carried to Kazuma by Dust and Rin, Megumin was reinvigorated when told of Rav revealing Wallaby's inability to fight prolonged battles because its core had already been damaged in the initial explosion on the relic. Consequently revived by Manatite and potions delivered by Luna, she proceeded to join all the other companions. When they damaged Wallaby so much it started spitting out small clones of itself, with the help of Luna's recovery items, Megumin cast explosions to help clear a path through the small clones so that Aqua and Kazuma could go destroy Wallaby's core. Several days later, when all the adventurers who had fought in the battle were drinking at the Gildan celebration, Megumin enjoyed the delicious warabi mochi that Aqua had cut out from the Wallaby. To be continued. Did you enjoy our video? Be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi and make sure you subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Thanks for watching. Peace.